Task is the new HBO crime drama miniseries created and written by Brad Ingelsby. Now, Brad's previous work includes films like Out of the Furnace, Run All Night, and The Way Back, and he's also the creator of one of my favorite television shows on HBO in recent memory by the name of Mayor of Easttown. Task is a story that follows a Philadelphia-based FBI agent who is put in charge of a task force to end a string of violent robberies undertaken by an unassuming family man. What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. For years, I've covered just about every genre of television out there, from comedies to horror to everything in between, but one of my favorites is crime dramas, especially on Sunday nights on HBO. Today, we are here to cover the first episode of Task, which is titled Crossing. This premiere episode doesn't just introduce us to these new characters in a situation, but it paints this intimate portrait of men grappling with profound loss, fractured faith, and the desperate search in the meaning of this world is turned upside down. As we unravel the intricate threads of Tom and Robbie's lives and explore the stark parallels and the differences that define their existence. Sit back and enjoy as I break down each scene and detail my thoughts of these characters and discuss this premiere episode. Spoilers ahead. We open in the calm and forest morning where we meet Tom. There's a hesitancy as he kneels attempting to pray in the morning. Has life's brutal hand left him convinced that prayer is no longer the answer? We get a shot of Tom's beautiful, well-kept house viewed from the outside, which to me suggests order, but appearances often are a fragile mask. Inside, we watch Tom's morning ritual, where we see him dumping ice into a sink and plunging his head into it, most likely a desperate attempt to shock himself awake, or potentially numb the pain, or simply endure. Later on in this episode, we see Tom taking a handful of Advil pills, which to me is another symptom of his body and mind under intense strain. To me, these moments aren't just discomfort for Tom, but it's a silent scream for relief. Now, in stark contrast, we're introduced to Robbie. Now, Robbie's house, while not bad, but not as well kept as Tom's, we see the overgrown yard and the rotting wood paneling. Taking note of both men's houses, you can notice again that one might have a better outside, but might be broken in the inside. We see Robbie, with a quiet sense of calm, moving a sleeping little boy from one bedroom to another as he tucks him in, sharing a tender moment. The subtle shots that we see in this opening sequence reveal a personal history. We see a tattoo on his back, which is dated 2/17/2023, and a matching date on the necklace in his car, confirming a profound loss, his brother Billy. Now, Robbie also has a tattoo on his neck, and it appears to be this Chinese symbol for forgiveness, which in my mind is a powerful signal hint at his eternal landscape and his eternal struggle. Is it for himself, for others, or for the circumstances that have shaped his life? It's within these opening scenes that we see the parallels of our two men. Tom, a special agent in the Philadelphia FBI division, seen on recruitment duty, struggles with a deep-seated weariness. Meanwhile, we see Robbie, who works as a waste collector, but his daily rounds serve as a dual purpose. With his friend Cliff, they discreetly scout a particular house, noting its telltale signs of drug activity as we see the bottles of pills. Now, as night falls, while Tom seeks oblivion and alcohol, Robbie and Cliff load a gun, preparing for a hit on the same trap house. Next morning, we see Tom in the garden where we're introduced to his daughter by the name of Emily, who's in a rush to go to school. Now, granted, she's off to school and didn't want to be late, but there seemed to be some unspoken tension and disconnect between the two, something that we learn a little bit more about later in the episode. Now, Robbie and Cliff talk about owning an island one day, and the conversation shows us that their day-to-day life shapes their thoughts.
Who picks up your trash?
Your trash?
Cliff talks about how he is thinking about taking care of trash. Who takes the trash when you're living on an island? Where Robbie says that that's something you don't think about, but instead you enjoy the life and the lifestyle you have. Robbie asks Cliff if he ever tried online dating, which he said he has, and it wasn't the best experience for him. As Robbie responds by saying he thinks that he's ready to share his life again with someone. Robbie needs a life companion, as he puts it, as he mentions that it's been over a year since Karen left. We see Tom at his table again, using some binoculars to look around as he's introduced to Kyle. Kyle has recently graduated with a degree in accounting, which he believes doesn't line up with being an FBI agent, as we get some information on Tom's background. We learn that Tom was a former priest of 8 years and his major was philosophy. A career trajectory that begs the question, what event would lead a man of spiritual guidance to trade the pulpit for handcuffs? We see Cliff and Robbie making their rounds and scouting the same house again, and knowing that the people inside have been busy lately as Robbie sets his sights on making a move that night before the money moves. As Robbie and Cliff recruit Peaches for the hit as he talks about recently finding love. Back with Tom, we see him looking over some legal documents that detail an incident involving manslaughter and unlawful assault on May 17th of 2023. The person involved will be sentenced from anywhere between 5 to 15 years, as Tom says that he doesn't want to make a statement in this case. Now, Tom's daughter, Emily, has mentioned this conversation about speaking on behalf of her brother. We are now starting to get a better understanding of the interaction between Tom and his daughter from earlier, as it appears that they lost their son Ethan in a crime. It's here that I assume that he died, and the loss explains why she wasn't interested in having a conversation with her dad, nor was she interested in him making dinner because of the loss that they've both experienced. This loss may explain Tom's struggle in prayer as well, more on Ethan's situation a little bit later. From a broken home into one that seems somewhat more stable, at least from the kids' perspective, as we see Robbie's kids are happy that he's home, but they're also happy to see Cliff, who they call Uncle Trash. It's here that we're introduced to Robbie's niece, Maeve, as little Wyatt upsets Maeve by calling the dinner that she made for everyone dog food. It's pretty clear that Maeve has taken on more responsibility since Karen has left and since Billy's death, who we later find out is her father. Now again, I want to talk about the parallels that we have going on in this episode so far. Both men are grieving, both are driven by family, and both are trying to navigate a world that has stolen something irreplaceable. But their coping mechanisms can't be more different. Tom draws his pain in alcohol, withdrawing from his remaining family, while Robbie charges into a life of crime, while it might not be one of menace, but a desperation, albeit misguided attempt to provide an escape for his. One man is tasked with withholding the law, and the other is breaking it. The irony is stark. Now Tom goes to see Emily at work to discuss the conversation he had with the lawyer about the case, and if Emily will be willing to make a statement. Now Emily isn't ready yet to make a statement, which in my mind, if she needs to make a statement, that means that she must have been there when the situation occurred. Now back with Robbie, we see photos of him with the same man seen in the necklace in his car and on the tattoo on his back. As I stated earlier, this is Uncle Billy. As Robbie tells his kids about a story of him and Billy about them riding the dragon into a new kingdom. Robbie tells little Wyatt that Uncle Billy is in their hearts and will always live with them. I'm starting to wonder if Billy died doing something that Robbie does in robbing trap houses. Now here we get some possible foreshadowing as Robbie lies to Maeve about what he's going to be doing the rest of the night with Cliff, as she mentions to him that he better not come home with a DUI, and we see him responding by saying, "They'll never catch me," because he knows the back roads like the back of his hand. To me, that seemed like a line to remember for future episodes. Now, like earlier, we watch as both men prepare for their evening. Tom, yet again, is getting hammered while Robbie gets his gear for tonight's hit. Tom using alcohol to mask his pain, while Robbie's using crime to occupy his mind and robbing for money as means to escape and provide for his family. Again, I can't help but to make this point in this way that both men have gone to crime in some way, where again, one's stopping crime while the other one's committed it. Now in the car, Peaches questions the choice of music as Robbie tells him it's transportative. Music that takes you away from your reality into another, as Robbie describes Peaches on a beach and not having a care in the world. Earlier in the episode, Robbie talked about having an island, and now he's talking about a beach. I'm starting to see what Robbie's dreams are, and one day escaping to this life of crime and being free with his family. But the question is, will his life decisions aid in this dream, or only be kept as just that, a dream that can never be fulfilled? We watch as Robbie does a ritual from his childhood that he would do with his now deceased brother. From jumping into the freezing water to robbing a trap house, this is a calming ritual for him, but also makes me think that he's thinking of his brother and that he's always having a reminder that his brother's always with him.
You take some water, you put it on both your shoulders. Your body gets used to the temperature and your heart slows, so it don't explode.
Now we see the trio wearing their masks. We have Cliff wearing a devil mask, we have Peaches wearing a werewolf mask, and Robbie's wearing a skeleton mask. Maybe more symbolic foreshadowing the death that hovers around their chosen path. Now after scouting this house, it's time to get the money. We see them tie up one of the men and beat the other one up until they find what they're looking for, which is the money. We see Robbie eventually finds the money and they seamlessly walk out, and we're assuming that they didn't kill these men inside, which is something to keep in mind for what happens in their next hit later in the episode. Now, Robbie's actions have consequences. The next morning, as a hungover Tom is called into the office, we're introduced to a superior by the name of Kathleen, who is facing retirement soon and reveals the gravity of the situation. A task force is needed because of the surge of targeted home invasions in particularly drug houses. So far, there have been 9 hits and 7 of them belonging to the notoriously violent Dark Hearts, which is a motorcycle gang. These robberies have resulted in a brutal retaliation threatening to unleash an all-out turf war. And it is up to Tom, the former priest, the grieving father, who is reluctantly thrust back into the field. Now this will be a 4-week job where Tom will be getting state trooper by the name of Elizabeth. He'll also be getting a detective by the name of Emilia and a CD by the name of Anthony. Not the A team that Tom was looking for, but due to budget cuts, this is the best team that they can put together. As Tom arrives to their headquarters, which is a busted up old trap house in the middle of nowhere. Now on the other side of town, we watch as Peaches, Robbie, and Cliff are celebrating after pulling off the successful hit job. Right now, it appears that Robbie's on the come up as we see Tom, meanwhile, is meticulously cleaning up this house, a man utterly at his rock bottom. Tom has been thrown into this mess, tasked with finding and stopping Robbie and his crew. This juxtaposition is interesting to see play out. We have one man riding a wave of ill-given gains and the other man drowning in personal despair, now burdened with this mission. It really makes me wonder, how much longer can Robbie's recent luck truly last? Speaking of, we see Robbie getting a text message with a new lead for a hit. So Robbie's getting fed these houses to hit, which makes me wonder, who is his point person, and are they a criminal or are they in law enforcement? It's here we see Robbie and Cliff collecting the trash on their new target, but Cliff's got a bad feeling about this, but we see Robbie, driven by ambition and perhaps necessity, brushes aside his concerns, reminding Cliff that this is a targeted house that they've been waiting for a while. To me, Cliff's unease is a red flag, which is foreshadowing for the chaos to come later. We shift back to Tom, where he's confronted by the full weight of his personal tragedy. It's here we see him dropping off a suit for one of the inmates by the name of Ethan. That's right, the same Ethan that was mentioned earlier, his son, who isn't a victim, but instead, he was the one that committed the crime. Now, Ethan is facing upwards of 15 years in prison, a sentence that was probably lessened because his father is in the FBI. Yet, Tom refuses to see him, and he's here to just simply drop off the suit. For Tom, once again, a priest, now an FBI agent, this is a different type of loss. Loss of a son's freedom and future due to his own actions. This to me added so much more layers and depth and complexity to the Tom character, blending his personal duty with an almost unbearable personal grief. We cut to more home life of Robbie and his family, giving us a much needed glimpse into Maeve's world. As she's getting ready for a date, a desperate attempt to reclaim somewhat of a normal life that she once had and not have to worry about the constant demands of maintaining this household. Meanwhile, we see as Robbie is browsing some online dating websites, he goes down to Maeve's room to snag a joint and thinking that she won't be back for a while. But we see Maeve returns a little bit earlier than expected. As we watch Robbie hide in her closet as things start to get a little bit more intimate between Maeve and her date, we see him having to walk out of the closet, and this is where Maeve date started a fight, but we watch as Robbie eventually kicks him out. As Robbie attempts to apologize, this is where the floodgates are open. Here we learn that Robbie doesn't own this house. Instead, we learn that it was actually his brother's house who actually passed it down to his daughter Maeve. We learn that Robbie actually lost his house and Maeve was the one that welcomed him into her house, allowing him and the kids to stay. But we find out that Maeve is kind of at a breaking point after what happened tonight. She's exhausted, she's upset about losing her father, and tired of helping raise another woman's children. She's desperately looking for a way to kind of regain her own life. Now, in the heat of the conversation, we see Maeve brings up her father as she talks about how he used to lie to her when she was younger, as she is confronting Robbie, telling him that she knows what he does for work and she doesn't want to have anything to do with it. As they continue to throw harsh words at one another, we see Maeve throws a drink into her uncle's face as we see Robbie is getting upset and he eventually tries to kick her out of her own house.
Pack up your shit and get out.
It's not your house, asshole!
It's not yours either! It's my brother's. My brother's.
Now, Maeve, however, doubts that he'll be able to manage without her, a doubt that has kept her tethered for this long. To me, this raw exchange reveals Robbie's dependency and crumbling instability of his domestic life, mirroring Tom's own broken home. As Robbie's daughter overhears everything, she begs Maeve to stay, highlighting the collateral damage for Robbie's choices. Now, back in Tom's world, we meet his new task force in person. Here we have Elizabeth, who is introduced in mid-argument on the phone, setting up a chaotic tone. Now here we have Emilia, who appears to have a thing about germs, as she has her wet wipes and hand sanitizer. This could mean that she's a meticulous investigator, potentially. And last but not least, we have Anthony, who seems unimpressed by the headquarters. First impressions are key. Elizabeth seems utterly unprepared. Her mind seems kind of elsewhere, dealing with whatever conversation she had on the phone about a recliner, and she clearly hasn't read the briefing yet. Meanwhile, we have Aaliyah and Anthony, who to me have like this level of being overqualified and perhaps even bored. This dynamic to me establishes this potential friction and possible comedic relief in this rather bleak tone of the show so far, even within the seriousness of the context of their mission. Now we get this little character moment where we see Tom has a thing for bird watching. He even has an app on his phone and he spots a bird out in the trees, but this bird watching is interrupted by the arrival of his friend, who's also a priest, who goes by the name of Father Daniel George. Now, for the first time in this entire episode, we see Tom laughing and smiling over dinner with Daniel that he brought over. Now, as the night goes on, we see Tom, who's now drunk, and here we see that disbelief in God I spoke of earlier as he mocks God's presence in the kitchen table.
Hello? Christ? Hello? Oh.
You must be taking a crap.
We see Father Daniel takes notice of Tom's heavy drinking and questions if him working on the task force is best. Now Tom dismisses his question as he takes off Daniel's collar and invites him to dance, telling him he's just a man as he blasts Well Fargo, Watch Out. We later see Daniel helps Tom in bed as his daughter arrives to lend a hand. In this moment, I got a sense that this is a recurrence of Tom as he drinks his pain and feelings away with his alcohol. I would imagine that Tom's descent into alcoholism, fueled by his son's fate, adds nothing but stress to Emily's life, who's also dealing with her brother's case. Now, as we come to an end of this episode, we end on this very brutal and nail-biting sequence. Robbie and his crew move in for the hit on the house that they scouted earlier. Everything immediately goes sideways. We see a woman in the other room fights back, managing to pull off Peach's mask, seeing his face, and also biting Cliff. Now, Peaches loses his gun in this situation, and also, again, his identity is compromised. Now, the man in the house claims to have recognized Robbie's voice, which is just intensifying the stakes. As Robbie frantically searches for the money, another guy arrives. Now, Peaches, in a desperate act, tells Robbie he'll handle the situation as he takes Robbie's gun and performs Robbie's ritualistic gesture. As he walks towards the man, he is unfortunately shot and killed. We see Cliff signals Robbie to find the money and plays music as a distraction as he hides. Now the woman frees her boyfriend and all hell breaks loose. Now we see Cliff shoots and kills the man that killed Peaches as the other guy attacks Cliff. Now Robbie finds Peaches' gun that he lost and saves Cliff from the man that was attacking him, and then they ultimately kill the woman as well. Now, I do wonder, based on this interaction, was this their first time killing someone on one of their hit jobs? To me, the answer is yes, this is their first time killing someone on the job, judging by their shock, but also the desperation in their actions. Now, in the gruesome aftermath, we watch as Robbie takes Peach's wallet and phone. This could be simply taking the evidence that ties them to Peaches. Now, after leaving the dead bodies behind, we see them finding the money in a bag that belonged to one of the guys they shot by the name of Warren. Now, as they leave, a child, the son of the murdered couple, emerges from his bedroom asking if they are their dad's friends.
Yeah, where's friends?
Did you hear fireworks?
Yeah, we heard them too.
At this point, Robbie and Cliff have their masks off, so they are now compromised. But in a moment of humanity amidst the horror, we see Robbie blocks the child from going upstairs from seeing his dead parents. The next morning, Tom receives a call from Anthony about the multiple homicides. As he arrives at the scene, Elizabeth surprisingly is effective by interviewing the neighbors and learning about the child sleeping in the basement when he acts up, a detail that would prove critical. As our final scene delivers a gut punch of a cliffhanger, we see Cliff and Robbie arrive back at Robbie's house, exhausted and haunted, but not alone. With them is the murdered man's son, the child they encountered moments after killing his parents. This moment throws a massive, morally ambiguous wrench into everything. It makes you wonder why they took this little boy and what they intend to do with him, as it raises questions about their capacity of evil or perhaps a twisted form of responsibility or guilt. To me, I think it's safe to assume that Robbie decided to take the little boy with them because he saw their face and he doesn't want them to maybe give the police any information on what they look like.
What have you done to us?
Wow. Wow. This episode had me on the edge the entire time, especially when we start to get a better understanding of these characters in the situation. Welcome back. Today we are here to break down episode 2 of HBO's Task, which was titled Family Statements. In this incredibly tense episode, we find out more about what happened to Billy and why Robbie is doing what he's doing. We watch as Maeve makes a good decision that almost goes bad, which had my heart pounding, and my jaw was on the ground the entire time during the dinner scene when we find out why Ethan is facing 15 years in prison. We've got one hell of an episode to discuss and break down. Full spoilers ahead. We open with the task force looking for anything they can find in the woods that can help them find Sam. Meanwhile, this is cut between Cliff and Robbie as Robbie puts Sam to bed, almost mirroring the opening scene from episode 1 of Robbie putting his own son Wyatt to bed, as this homicide case has now become a missing person case as well. It's here we're introduced to a new character by the name of Jason, who's awoken by a phone call. We see this giant tattoo on his back of the Dark Hearts, which we know is the same motorcycle gang that was mentioned in episode 1. The call Jason receives is about the death of Warren, Derek, and Joanne, and Sam's disappearance. Now, his lady Erin asks him if he knows who did it, and he tells her it's probably the same crew that's been hitting them recently. Now, as someone that likes to pay attention to characters' reactions during pivotal moments, Erin's response here immediately caught my eye. The look she gives Jason when he takes the call was very suspicious to me. Now, of course, she's in a relationship with the head of a gang, so a natural reaction would be to worry when you have these type of phone calls so early in the morning. But what if Erin was anticipating this very call? What if she's the mysterious MZ Robbie's connect? We don't know yet if she knows Maeve, or if she might have known Billy, Robbie's deceased brother. More on that a little bit later. Now, while it's a bold theory, I'm keeping a very close eye on Erin. She could just simply be worried, or could be actively working to sabotage her boyfriend's entire business, perhaps for reasons unknown. We'll have to wait to see how this unfolds. Now, back at Robbie's house, he hears his kids and Maeve are now up. His immediate reaction is to ensure that no one finds Sam in his room. As Robbie attempts to play cool, try not to show any emotion from the weight of last night's events or the fact that he's currently holding a kid hostage. He even agrees to join his daughter later in the week for a father and daughter dance, a almost jarring moment of domestic normalcy amidst the chaos going on. Now, as Maeve drops off the kids at school, Robbie stays home, lying about being sick, one of the many lies we see him tell throughout this episode. Now, this downtime allows him to message MZ, his connect, needing to report what happened about the night before about the hit. Meanwhile, we see Cliff is panicking, as he tells Robbie they had no idea a kid was supposed to be there, as he's clearly haunted by the faces of the people that were murdered and the very people he killed. Now, this answers the question I had last week. Have these guys ever killed before? And based off Cliff's raw reaction, it's clear they haven't. This is a new traumatic territory for both of these characters. Now, Robbie, being the more grounded between the two, tries to comfort Cliff by reminding him that in all their years that they've known each other, he's always found a way out. Now, Robbie believes there's always a reason for things to happen, but this isn't working for Cliff this time, as Peaches, their friend, is now dead. As Robbie looks at Cliff and tells him,
Then we gotta make one. We gotta make a fucking reason.
which to me is a dark promise that solidifies a deeper plunge into their mistake. Now outside, Robbie and Cliff open the trunk to see what was in the bag that they took from Warren. Now, unfortunately for them, there's no money inside, but instead they find pounds of wrapped, uncut fentanyl. As we see Robbie texting MZ, wrong package. Now we watch as little Sam comes out of the house, letting Robbie know that he's hungry. Now Robbie sends Cliff into town to get some test strips to confirm the drugs are pure, as their new plan is to sell these drugs, and later in the episode, Cliff does confirm that the fentanyl is indeed pure, setting them up for a dangerous new path. Now, back inside, Robbie makes Sam some pancakes. Now, this scene here to me just highlights how much trouble Robbie's found himself in. Not only has Sam seen both Cliff and Robbie's faces, he's now been inside Robbie's home, and Robbie even tells him his real name. Now, we get a moment where Sam says he wished that he could talk to animals, particularly he wants to talk to deers to warn them not to cross the street because they get hit by cars and die. Now, could this be some possible foreshadowing, a hint at something tragically happening to Sam? Perhaps he gets hit by a car at some point this season. I know it's a dark thought, but worth noting. Now, speaking of Robbie lying, Sam asks Robbie how long he'll be staying with them. Now, Robbie decides at this point to lie as he makes up a story about Sam's grandmother being sick and that being the reason why he has to stay with them for a couple days. Now, Sam's persistent. He wants to know how Robbie knows his parents, as Robbie tells him that his brother, his dead brother Billy, used to work with Sam's father before Sam was even born. This is a significant detail because later we find out that Robbie was actually telling the truth for one of the first times in this episode about Billy knowing Sam's dad and that they used to work together way back when. There's clearly more to this story that's revealed much later. Now, like last week, where we cut between Tom and Robbie's story to highlight the differences and the similarities, this episode truly excels in showcasing how both Robbie and Tom switch between their jobs and their roles as fathers. One moment we watch Robbie is dealing with a panicking Cliff and stashing deadly drugs, only to be making pancakes for Sam moments later. Tom, meanwhile, is immersed in a harrowing homicide missing persons case, but also has to juggle spending time with his own family. I'm really appreciating these dual perspectives of our main characters. To me, it emphasizes a core thematic element of the show. These are men, many of them fathers, operating in vastly different worlds, yet bound by their responsibilities of family and circumstances. As their paths continue to cross, the tension and the emotional stakes only grow higher. Now back at Jason's house, we see he has kids of his own, further reinforcing this idea of family men operating within dangerous circles. Now he's gathered some members of his gang to his house demanding answers about the other dead body found at his friend's place, who we know to be Peaches. But more importantly, he wants to know whoever made the hit knew about the shipment. Now, one of the gang members by the name of Shane mentions how Sam's most likely dead, which clearly pisses Jason off, as he tells them to call a meeting to bring everyone in for later that evening. Again, paying attention to characters' faces, the character here, Shane, might be another candidate for the mole inside the Dark Hearts. He had a look of concern to me when Jason mentioned how the people knew about the shipment, and his remark about Sam potentially being dead felt a little too dismissive. Almost like he was trying to divert attention from them going to look for Sam. Now, Shane does something later in this episode that felt even more suspicious. Meanwhile, Tom and Anthony interview Keeley, Peach's fiance, and her father. Last week, Peaches mentioned how he only had just met Keeley, and her raw honesty in this conversation confirms it. She doesn't know any of Peach's friends, and she was clueless about who he was with the night that he died. Now, Tom informs her and her father that Peaches was a part of a home invasion, and this wasn't his first time. Now, this news upsets Keeley, but also upsets her father because he knew that Peaches wasn't good for her daughter. You can see how upset that Keeley is in this moment because she felt that Peaches was her soulmate, but she didn't know this other side of him. As Tom and Anthony then press on the disappearance of Sam, this really sends Keeley over, and her emotions just says it all. Now Keeley has them leave, and to me again, this scene perfectly encapsulates one of the show's core themes so far. Everyone has sides to them that others don't know about. Keeley, a man of her dreams, was a criminal. Tom being an ex-priest, we have family man Robbie being a criminal. But I also want to talk about how this scene further highlights the domino effect of Robbie's decision to ignore Cliff's warning about the robbery, which is obviously impacting everyone, including these innocent lives of Keeley and her father that we see later in the episode. Now we cut to Tom and Anthony in his car, and this is where we get some more insight about Tom's complex past. First, we learn that his daughter Sarah is coming into town, a nice callback to the family photo we saw back in episode 1. Then Tom tells Anthony what led him to join the FBI. He's been working with the FBI since 2003, but he was helping them before that back when he was a priest. Now Tom connects the dots, explaining how he got involved with the FBI through their crisis intervention team as part of the mass casualty events. Now, thinking back to the scene with Keeley, he wasn't aggressive with her, he even seemed to sympathize with her. To me, he understood what it felt like to have someone you thought you knew do something unbelievable, and grappling with that shocking disconnect. Now, as Tom explains, he got involved to answer the question that people during these moments would have, and that is, why did God allow this to happen? Now, Anthony, in turn, shares a bit of his own backstory, revealing that he grew up a Catholic, attending church every Sunday for 18 years. To me, this shared history with the church and religion is a fascinating connection that grounds these two. Will Tom ever have to answer that fundamental question for Anthony, especially given the grim reality of their line of work? Now, I also took notice of how much Anthony has learned about Tom in this scene. I say that because, again, not only does the Dark Hearts have a mole in their crew, but it appears that the FBI does as well. Now, the emotional weight throughout this episode continues as we check in with Emily, meeting with what appears to be some type of school counselor. This scene is a quiet but powerful exploration of showing how hidden burdens young people have to carry. Now, Emily reveals her concern about her father's drinking. She's noticed the cup that he used for iced tea back in the day is now used to disguise his heavy alcohol, making her believe he's trying to hide it from her. She really wants to confront her dad about his drinking, but with Ethan's sentencing going on, she holds back, fearing it could only add more stress to his plate. Now, the family statement for Ethan is coming up, and Emily is still torn. She fears that not making a statement means abandoning her brother, yet she also admits that the thought of Ethan getting out scares her even more. Now, in this scene, we also hear more about Ethan's struggles with mental health over the years, even with treatment. This conversation is incredibly important because it sets the stage for a powerful and emotionally charged family dinner scene for later. Again, speaking to Emily in this scene, her eternal conflict highlights the devastating ripple effect of Ethan's actions on his entire family. Now, back at the headquarters, the task force is holding a status meeting, and we get some critical updates. They've identified 12 homes with ring cams, and that could provide leads for a vehicle. We also learn more about Sam's unfortunate circumstances. For a while, he was living with his grandmother because his parents were deemed unfit. He only ended back with his parents after his grandmother moved into a living facility and his parents managed to pass a series of drug tests. As the show often hints, everything happens for a reason. Now, Lizzie, who often seems a bit unsynced with the team, actually asks a pretty important question.
No, I don't understand why you take the kid at all.
I think you're following the wrong trail here.
Lizzie might be onto something big, and I have a feeling ignoring her insights will come back into play in the task force at some point this season. Now, Anthony provides a deeper look into the Dark Hearts. Jason, their leader, was handpicked by Perry Girazzo, a major player in the Mother Club, one of the 12 national leaders overseeing all the gang organizations. Now, Perry mentored Jason from a young age, even taking out the previous leader to assure Jason's ascent. Now, under Jason's leadership, the Dark Hearts have thrived, becoming the second largest fentanyl distributor. We also get a clearer picture of the city's power dynamics. The Dominicans, led by Freddy, control the city, while the Dark Hearts dominate the rural areas. Anthony points out that the home invasions just don't make sense for such a well-oiled machine. Tom agrees, suggesting whoever's involved must have help from the inside, deep inside, probably an informant. Now, to me, this definitely ties into my theory that I mentioned last week that MZ possibly being law enforcement or now a key member of the Dark Hearts. Anthony, however, rightfully cast doubts on the task force fighting this mole before the Dark Hearts do, warning they could lose their only good lead. Now, speaking of Perry, we finally meet him as he makes a very intimidating visit to Jason. The Mother Club recently had a meeting and their top priorities are clear. Find the leak and locate Sam immediately. Now, Perry wastes no time in expressing his disappointment, questioning Jason's leadership, and reminding him that all the cleaning up Perry's done for him doesn't come easy. There's definitely some tension between these two as Perry grabs Jason's face, furious that all this chaos is making him look weak. Now, Jason, desperate to regain control, explains their plan to track down whoever stole their fentanyl. It's a very rare sale, so if Robbie and Cliff try to move it, it'll be easy to trace the money back to them. And here's where things get really interesting. Jason reveals he's aware of the task force that's been set up, and even more, he talks about how Tom is leading them and he's not too concerned with Tom. To me, Jason remarks about Tom and not being concerned with him. That to me confirms that there is a mole within the task force potentially. He knows too much, especially that Tom is the leader, so my burning question is, who is the mole inside the task force? Is it Lizzie? To me, she seems the obvious candidate because she doesn't seem to fit into this group like the others, but something is too obvious about that choice. She might be a red herring. Now we have Anthony, who's my number one contender, but there's a little bit of a curveball in that, right? He and Tom are forming a bond, and he's been also asking a lot of questions about Tom's past and how he became an FBI agent. Is he genuinely curious, or is he gathering intel to pass along to the Dark Hearts? Could it be someone else we least expect? I really hope that there's no one in the task force because I like this dynamic in these characters, but if there is one, who do you think it is? Could it be Emilia, Lizzie, Anthony, or someone else? Now, going back to the scene between Perry and Jason, their dynamic continues to show the exploration of the complex relationship between fathers and sons. Now, Perry isn't his biological father, but again, the idea of him being his mentor and just pairing that with someone like Tom and Ethan, or Robbie and Wyatt, and now again, you have Jason and Perry. These relationships are clearly central to the show's narrative. Now, back with Tom, we get a major clue to what happened to Billy that really gives us one of the biggest reasons to why Robbie is doing what he's doing with robbing the houses and taking the money from the Dark Hearts. Now, it's here we're introduced to a new character by the name of Agent Joe Easley, who's an expert on local gang operations, as he meets with Tom and, notably, Anthony. This presence of Anthony, once again to me, just kind of plays on him being around people, getting sensitive information. It only adds more weight to my theory of him being the potential mole. Now, Easley tells them a story about a rule violation within the Dark Hearts gang. Jason, in a private meeting, brutally beat up a gang member for hours so severely that his brains had to be mopped up off the floor. And that gang member's name was Billy. Yes, Ronnie's recently deceased brother and Maeve's father, Billy. Now, Maeve herself told the detective in an interview that she confirmed that she knew that Jason was involved. This is a huge reveal because Jason brutally killing Billy, to me, that directly explains why Robbie is primarily targeting the Dark Hearts homes. It's a calculated, vengeful strike for his brother's murder. Now, let's further explore this rule violation. Could Billy have been romantically involved with Jason's girlfriend or wife or whoever she is, Erin, and again, who I think could potentially be MZ? Again, if Billy slept with the boss's girl, Erin, that would definitely lead to him being killed by the head of the gang. Now, could this rule violation have been simply that Billy just wanted out of this lifestyle? And like most gangs, you don't leave without consequences, or you don't ever leave. Whatever the violation was, it doesn't matter because, again, this is to me what led to Robbie doing what he's doing now. Now, come to think about it, this also clarifies Derek's statements in last week's episode where he said he recognized Robbie's voice. It makes perfect sense now. Robbie was connected to the Dark Hearts through Billy. This connection also raises another possibility. Did Derek play a part into Billy's death? If so, it could explain Robbie's eagerness to hit Derek's house and why Robbie was the one to personally shoot and kill Derek. Man, I tell you, the layers of revenge runs deep in this show. While the truth about Billy emerges, we get more insight into Maeve's life. Now at work, she talks about her recently bad date as her co-worker friend offers her a place to stay due to her problems with her uncle. Now in this moment, there's a brief scene where a phone is put in lost and found, and that detail will come back later in the episode. Now back with Robbie, he receives a message from MZ about meeting later that evening. But first, he has to deal with Maeve. He spins another lie to why Sam's staying, telling Maeve that his mother is sick. This is the third or fourth time that Robbie's lied in this episode? It's really crazy to watch how easily and convincing he can lie. Robbie really has a calm demeanor and really wears it well as a mask. He's hiding deep-seated emotions and pain, finding it easier to lie than to show raw vulnerability. However, at least one of his lies in this episode finally catch up to him. Now, after his bath, Sam asks Maeve if she could call his mom to ask for a toy. He then gives her his mother's full name, a name that doesn't match anything that Robbie told her. More importantly, it's a name Maeve recognizes due to her father and her uncle's history. A quick Google search of Derek's name quickly reveals articles detailing Sam's disappearance and his parents' death. Meanwhile, Tom continues to display his dismissive side. He receives a phone call from a psychic claiming to know Sam's whereabouts, but again, he pays this person no mind, echoing his earlier disregard of Liz's instincts. Throughout this episode, you can tell Tom's mind is occupied with his upcoming meeting with his daughters. Now here we get this really great shot of the Dark Hearts riding to their gathering. Now I have to point out Shane's individual solo shot in this scene. This solo shot to me just kind of goes further to me thinking that Shane's gonna be a very important character to the story and not just a throwaway character. Now at the Dark Hearts meeting, Perry informs Jason about a morning meeting with Freddy. Perry wants to keep the stolen drugs under lock and key, hoping their robbers will make a mistake. Now it's a little bit later in the scene, but we see Perry having his eyes on Shane, which makes me wonder, is Shane being the rat too obvious? Could he be a red herring? Sometimes the answers are right in front of us, but it feels almost planted. Now Jason tells Perry that only Shane and Breaker knew about the drugs traveling the night before. Now Breaker is the guy we met earlier in Jay's kitchen, making him another strong mole candidate. Now also in this scene, there is a quick brief interaction between Breaker and Shane arguing that could be important. Maybe they're working together. Now we catch up to Robbie and Cliff at the bar awaiting MZ. Now Cliff is still understandably freaking out about Sam, whose picture and name are now plastered all over the news. Now Robbie continues to try to calm down Cliff as he tells him they'll figure something out to do with the kid once they sell the drugs. Now Cliff's anxiety about Sam to me is really growing in this episode, which makes me wonder, will he take matters into his own hands to get rid of Sam, or will he stick with Robbie's plan? Now MZ texts Robbie canceling their meeting because his boss is keeping him late. The question again, who is MZ and who is his boss? Is this Shane? Is it someone else entirely? Let me know, who do you all think MZ is? Now going back to episode 1 where Robbie was talking about maybe going online to date a female and getting back into the dating game, we see Robbie making eyes with a woman at the bar. Now will this woman be relevant to the story? We'll have to find out in further weeks. Now, at Tom's, Sarah arrives with her newborn as they sit down with Matt, their lawyer, to discuss the family statement. Now, Ethan has pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, as we also learn that Emily has been the only one to see him since the murder. Emily speaks up and says that she's thinking about making a statement, which is surprising to her older sister Sarah, and she wants to know what exactly does Emily plan to say.
Telling the judge a little bit about how we grew up, Ethan and I, before we were adopted by Mom and Dad.
She also believes her brother won't be getting the help that he needs inside the prison. Now, Sarah isn't on the same page as Emily on making this statement because it could affect Ethan's sentencing from getting 5 years versus 15. Now, it's here we get the big moment. The reason we hadn't seen or met the mother, Tom's wife, is because Ethan murdered her. Sarah makes a distinct point by saying that Emily's brother did it, separating her from being called her brother.
Don't say it like that.
Say it like
Don't
what?
do that. He had a psychiatric disorder, and he was off his meds because of
he threw Mom
COVID.
down the stairs. He broke her neck.
Sarah goes on further by asking her father how would he feel if Ethan returned home after 5 years and is living in his house again after killing her mother, his wife. Now, Emily speaks up to say that it was her mother too, in which Sarah makes a face as to say technically not your biological mother, as Emily walks out of the room. Wow. Could you imagine being in this situation? As messed up as it may sound, I can kind of understand Sarah's feelings about having these adopted siblings who I'm sure she loved, and based on the family photo in episode 1, she was raised with them kids. So the idea of a non-biological child coming in and killing your mom, that's a tough pill to swallow. And of course, thinking about Emily in this scene, thinking about the fact that this family brought you and your brother in, while yes, having mental health issues, still he murdered your mom. Now, I do wonder if the race of Emily and Ethan will play into the situation, because if you all do not know, the actress who plays Emily is Dominican. Now, this revelation plays back into another central theme that we've seen so far these 2 episodes. We see how these teenagers and kids are in broken homes destroyed by losing someone, or particularly losing one of their parents. We see Sam, who's lost both his mom and his dad. We have Maeve, who lost her father, and we have yet to meet her mother or to find out if her mother's even in the picture. And of course, we have Emily, Sarah, and Ethan. But one of the most profound moments and lines is said by Tom in this scene. Back when he was a priest, he would have to answer for those seeking help and forgiveness.
It's easy to talk about forgiveness when it's not your loss.
That hit me so hard because I think about when people say when you lose someone, you'll be okay, or I know how you feel. To me, this scene just solidifies why you cast someone as great as Mark Ruffalo in this role. Him mentioning how much he misses his wife and his son, and how every morning he wakes up in disbelief to what happened to them. The look on his face just says it all. His prayers haven't been answered by God. He's completely lost, just as all of our main characters are as well. Man, I'm telling y'all, I did not expect this scene to shock me as much as it did. Again, this was just heartbreaking. It was a huge reveal, and it was just such a well-written and well-acted scene. Now, back at Ronnie's, Maeve wakes up Sam to go with her to get him a present for finishing his book. Now, as they arrive to the toy store, as Maeve suggests he go inside to pick up his Batman toy he wanted, as she'll meet him inside. Now we watch as Maeve goes back to her job and uses that lost and found cell phone to call 911 as she's using it to be anonymous. Now, before we get into one of the most tense scenes of this episode, we get a nice moment between Anthony and Lizzie as he shares with her his experience as a DJ back in the day to pay for college.
Routine.
Yeah.
What was the routine?
I can't remember, Stover. It was, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the St. Monica 7th and 8th grade mixer tour. Before we get started, a few rules.
Now, I could be wrong about Anthony, about being the inside man for the gang, but I do think he's a DJ, or used to be a DJ, and you think about nightclubs and how you can get mixed in with the wrong crowd of people, aka gang members. Now, again, I know he said that he DJ'd for high school parties, but again, I would imagine that he would find himself into nightclubs sometimes as well. Now, their moment is broken up by them getting a call about Sam's sighting. Now, talking about my theory of me thinking that Anthony is the mole. Now, again, I could be wrong, I could be right, but I think my gut's telling me the reason why I think I'm picking on him has nothing to do with the show or the character. A little bit to the show, obviously, but maybe because he does such a great job of playing Sir Criston Cole. If you all don't know, I do cover House of the Dragon on the show, and that is a character that I absolutely hate. So I would admit, maybe I'm a little bit biased towards Anthony because of the actor playing someone else that I hate from another show, who can't be trusted, by the way. Now, Maeve goes back to her car as the police arrive, and in her back seat, she finds Sam, who didn't feel safe to go in a store by himself alone because he got scared. Now, to me, this makes sense that he would return and was scared because you'll have to imagine that the kid's most likely dealing with abandonment with his whole parents leaving him at one point of his life. Man, I feel bad for little Sam, and I really hope that he makes it out of this situation alive, and maybe him and Maeve and her cousins will be okay by the end of the story. Now, Maeve has him climb into the trunk to hide. As she tries to leave, the police are checking the cars before they leave the plaza. Now, Tom arrives at the plaza as Robbie tries calling Maeve, but she doesn't answer. Man, I wish I would have had a live reaction during this scene because I was literally on the edge of my seat throughout this entire moment. As Maeve thinks quick on her feet and tells the officers that she's a manager at one of the stores, and she mentions that she saw a kid wandering around as Tom comes to her car to question her. He has her park her car and come inside to identify the kid that she mentioned. They have a lineup of kids for her to identify, all while Sam is still in her trunk. As we watch, Maeve picks a random kid as Tom calls it a bum call, a fake tip, and they go about their way. Now again, this whole scene was so intense. You follow that with the emotional scene about Ethan's reveal. With this tense scene, this episode was just so incredible to me. But I want to go back to Maeve and her co-worker. I want to point out that her friend at work gave her a look that to me says that she knows that Maeve lied and she could confront her about this at some point. Now we end this episode with Jason getting the information about Peach's body as he visits his fiance's house. As Keeley dad answers the door and we're left to hearing screaming inside, and I'm to assume that they're both gonna either be badly hurt or they were killed. Again, this all falls back on Robbie. Now, yes, Peaches is a grown-ass man. He can make his own decisions. He didn't have to go with them. But I feel this speaks to Robbie being so persuasive and knowing how to use his kind demeanor to take advantage of people that trust him. Again, I feel like this show is doing a good job of making the viewer either feel bad or want to root or don't care for Robbie, but I think the performance and how Robbie is written, and honestly how all these characters and all these actors are acting so far, has been so well written with such depth, and we're only 2 episodes in. As we watch Tom call Sarah to check to see if Emily's home yet, he makes a U-turn because he knows exactly where she is. He finds his daughter at the same park her brother went to after running away from home after a bad experience with playing lacrosse. Now Maeve returns home and gives one of the best and most devastating looks I've seen from someone in a long time in a television show, as she looks and has tears down her face and looks Robbie in the face and asks him what he's done to this family.
Why? I spent my whole life trying to get away from these people.
They murdered my brother.
Right. That's exactly
And
why
then
we're
they
gonna
had
stay
the nerve
away.
to show up at the memorial service and hug you and shake my hand. Jason shook my hand with the same hand he used to beat your father's brains out.
It's that right there. Forgiveness. Is that even possible under the circumstances that these characters find themselves in? Welcome back, where today we'll be breaking down episode 3 of Task, which was titled Nobody Stronger Than Forgiveness. It's in this episode that we find out who MZ is, but is there another leak within the Dark Hearts? We see Cliff makes a terrible decision that has made them a target in an investigation, and speaking of the investigation, Tom finds out that there's a leak within the task force, but the question is, who? We've got another great episode to discuss and break down, so let's get right into it. Spoilers ahead. The episode opens with Robbie and Maeve in a tense conversation. Now, while the kids are asleep inside, we see Robbie finally lays out his motivations behind his recent crimes and putting his family at an incredible risk. This all began after members of the Dark Hearts, including Jason, attended Billy's funeral. He recounts the audacious moment Jason, the very man who beat his brother's brains out, had the nerve to shake his hand. And despite knowing Jason being the one responsible for his brother's death, Robbie was forced to utter the polite, gut-wrenching phrase,
Say thank you for coming.
For Robbie, Billy's death cannot be in vain. He believes taking the Dark Heart's money and making a better life for his family is the only way to honor his brother. To me, this is a critical interaction of revenge and a deeply flawed sense of justice. He's convinced himself that his actions are righteous, the only possible response to an unbearable loss. But Maeve, grounded in painful reality, challenges him. His justifications don't erase the truth. If and when he gets caught, his children will always remember him as a thief, a murderer, and a kidnapper. That will be his legacy, one that is already being forged. Maeve foresees Jason eventually discovering Robbie's involvement, a prospect Robbie embraces, welcoming the opportunity to finishing what he couldn't do at the funeral.
Let him come and
Shake my hand! See what happens this time, mother!
This isn't the Robbie Maeve knows, and she desperately reminds him of the life he had before seamlessly throwing it all away for revenge. Now, Robbie's response is a desperate testament to his exhaustion with his former existence. He describes his so-called life as a trash man picking up others' garbage and coming home to kids who constantly ask if their mother is ever coming back, a question he has no answers for. He's tired of that life. He pleads with Maeve for a few more days, revealing the stolen drugs are worth at least $1 million. He wants to take care of his kids, and he needs his only remaining family, Maeve, to support this decision, regardless of it being a happy or sad ending. Well, let me tell you, it looks like the emotional weight from last week's episode carried right into this opening scene, and man, I just felt Robbie's anger and frustration and hate towards what happened to his brother, which ultimately led him to believe that he can pull this off. Now, I'm clearly not saying what Robbie's doing is right. Killing and kidnapping is never the answer, but I can see how someone in Robbie's situation could be fueled by such revenge and could force themselves to believe that they are doing the right thing and it's the only way to handle this. This to me was the perfect table setter for the theme of this episode, and that's forgiveness. Robbie can't forgive or forget what Jason did, and that's put him and his family in danger. As we watch throughout this episode, we see other characters having to be faced with a similar situation, and that's giving forgiveness as well. Meanwhile, at the task force HQ, Kathleen is under pressure. An upcoming press conference requires updates on the recent events. Now, Lizzie provides intel on Peach's past, including a prison stint for assault, and she plans to visit his job for more leads. Now, Emilia reveals a significant development. A tracker was placed on a drug runner named Cosmos Gill's car. Cosmos was involved in picking up the fentanyl from the Dark Hearts, valued at an estimated $1.6 million. Again, the working theory that the task force currently have, and I have as well, and that there is a leak, a rat, inside the Dark Hearts that are communicating with Robbie. Now, in connection with my theory that Tony is the leak from last week, did you all notice who was late to this meeting? It was Tony. Now, later in this episode, he makes an abrupt end to the hangout with Lizzie. Again, the question is Tony the leak within the task force? More on that a little bit later. Now, it's here that we're officially introduced to Freddy, the head of the Dominicans who control the drug distribution across the city. Now, Freddy is well aware of the recent hits on the Dark Hearts houses. Now, Jason and Perry need his help, and he questions why he should help them, but we see Perry and Jason quickly explain the threat. These recent raids are disrupting the Dark Hearts business, which we know is the second largest drug distribution in the city. If their product isn't selling, competitors will replace them, causing a domino effect that would eventually impact Freddy's own operations. Now, this is the kind of guy that Freddy is. Freddy shares a story of his early days in America as he was beaten by bikers who disliked him because of his skin color. Since then, he's made it his mission to assure that his product is cheaper, purer, and faster than any of his competitors, including the Dark Hearts. He's in control, knowing they need him more than he needs them, as they agree to pay him 50% wholesale if the people who rob them come to Freddy to push the drugs. So, what did I take away from this scene? First off, Freddy seems to be a self-made man. He wasn't handed a gang to lead like Jason, but he grew his own empire himself. Second, he isn't just going to take whatever scraps the Dark Hearts hand him. He wants what he thinks he deserves because they're coming to him for help, and again, it's not the other way around. And lastly, this cast just keeps getting better. I've been such a big fan of Elvis Nolasco since I was a kid, watching him pop up on television shows, whether that was New York Undercover, Law and Order, NYPD Blue, just to name a few. But also, I know him from his frequent collaborations with Spike Lee, like Clockers, and even his most recent role when he played a supernatural serial killer in Mr. Crockett. He's just an incredibly talented actor. Now, this to me was a great introduction to this character, and his inclusion, I'm sure, will only add more depth and complexity to this overall story. It's clear that Freddy knows what's going around in his town, so him already knowing about the recent hits on the Dark Hearts isn't surprising, but I do wonder if he or someone in his crew may be the one that might be assisting Cliff. Freddy mentioned how his product is much better than his competitors, so I wonder if he's some way wrapped into the league. He might have given Cliff that gun, he might be talking to Robbie on the side, and that's like his way of getting back at the Dark Hearts, is like working on a way of getting them robbed and disrupting their distribution. Now, back at Robbie's, MZ texted him to meet for a swim, and as soon as I saw that text, I said to myself, what drug dealer texts another person that's a criminal to go for a swim? This, to me, immediately, my theory about Aaron being involved was becoming a reality. As someone that likes to pay attention to characters' reactions during pivotal moments, Aaron's response here immediately caught my eye. The look she gives Jason when he takes the call was very suspicious to me. Now, of course, she's in a relationship with the head of a gang, so a natural reaction would be to worry when you have these type of phone calls so early in the morning. But what if Aaron was anticipating this very call? What if she's the mysterious MZ Robbie's connect? Speaking of, we watch as Robbie and Cliff go to meet MZ, and it's cut between them driving and Maeve looking at old photos of her and her dad Billy. And as she picks up one of the photos of Billy, and there's a woman in one of the photos, and we see Billy and her are happy together, and that woman is no other than Erin, confirming my suspicions that I had about her last week. Could Billy have been romantically involved with Jason's girlfriend or wife or whoever she is, Erin, and again, who I think could potentially be MZ. Again, if Billy slept with the boss's girl Erin, that would definitely lead to him being killed by the head of the gang. Now we watch as Robbie and Erin hug, but Cliff's got a bone to pick with her because it was her job to feed them all the right things to ensure that the hit goes smoothly, but obviously we know it was far from a smooth hit as Cliff yells at her for basically being the one to drop the ball on the whole situation. Now Erin tells Robbie about the meeting between Jason and Freddie, making it impossible for Robbie to use Freddie to move the drugs. Now Erin believes Jason's days are numbered, which means Robbie and Erin's plan is working. Now, Robbie's not concerned about the original plan, he only cares about getting the money for his family. It's here we learn what I suspected, that Billy and Erin were romantically involved and she loved him despite being in a relationship with Jason. Erin tells Robbie to hold off from moving the drugs until she gives him the okay, despite Robbie's eagerness to move them. Now, Cliff, on the other hand, believes they're on their own now, and he doesn't trust Erin as he tells Robbie that he knows someone who might help them move the drugs. Now, MZB and Erin didn't come as a shocker to me because of my theory that I shared with you all last week, but it all makes sense. Remembering the text that MZ sent Robbie about saying her boss kept her late last week, that was in reference to Donna, who we briefly met at the bar in last week's episode. This revelation has so many implications now, especially knowing that Jason's on the chopping block, and now having his girl being a rat doesn't do him any favors. Now the question is, how did Jason find out about this affair, and how long was this affair going on? Now, I'm thinking about Jason interacting with those two kids, and they seem to be his kids, and I'm assuming that they may be Erin's kids as well. Well, I'm starting to think maybe those kids aren't Jason's, maybe they're Billy's. Now, forensics confirms the bullets recovered from the murders of Joanne and Warren match a weapon previously used in a gang shootout years ago. Now, the gun used was known to belong to a Dark Heart member. So I went back to episode 1 to see whose gun was it that was used to kill Joanne and Warren, and it was Cliff. So how did Cliff come to having a gun that was used years ago and was used by the same gang they're robbing? Did Cliff take it from one of the houses they hit? Did he buy it off some random person off the streets that came across the gun? Or was this a part of Robbie's plan to use an old weapon of the Dark Hearts to make it look like it was an inside job? Meanwhile, Aaliyah and Lizzie pay a visit to Peach's job and pass out missing flyers of Sam, hoping to get some more information. There's a reward given to the person who comes forward with any important information as to finding Sam, as we get this particular guy, who we later know as Denny, as the camera focuses on him. Now, back with Tom, he and Tony pay a visit to Jason at the bar to question him. They show him footage from the 2017 shootout as Perry steps in. Tom cuts straight to the facts. They've got a leak and they know it. Tom tells them that whoever the gun belongs to is most likely the leak and will help them find Sam. Now, Perry and Jason, being who they are, give them the cold shoulder and say they'll handle it in-house, and they have them leave. Now, based on the interaction, either Tony's one hell of an actor because I believe he already knows Perry and Jason based on my theory, or he's not the leak that I believe him to be within the task force. Now, just because we know that Erin's involvement as MZ, this gun situation could still mean that there is two leaks within the Dark Hearts, making Shane and Breaker those leaks besides Erin. Now, perhaps one of the more subtle but important moments of the episode unfold at the pond, where Sam and Maeve's bond continues to deepen. We see Sam and Maeve bonding over making better decisions than their troubled parents, a shared journey of seeking different paths. Now, Sam yet again brings up Deers. Last week, he mentioned how he wished that he can talk to Deers to warn them to stay off the road and not get hit, and here he's now seeing Deers in person and telling them the exact same thing. To me, this is deliberate. It seems to be setting up Sam having something to do with Deers at some point this season. Now, this is a sweet moment between the two characters, as Sam was never taught how to swim, so we watch as Maeve teaches him how to float. In doing so, she tells him how her father Billy taught her by throwing her right into the pool, as here we see she's doing the opposite with Sam as he tells her that she's a much better teacher than her father. As she tells Sam that the beauty of getting older is you can choose what you take from your parents and what you leave behind. Again, I think this is all setting up a tragic ending for at least one, if not both of these characters. It's not their faults that both of their parents indirectly has both of them in their current situations. Sam's parents' involvement with the Dark Hearts led to their deaths and his kidnapping, and Billy's relationship with Aaron got him killed, and the rest is history. Both Sam and Maeve share the same experience of losing their parents, and now it'll be interesting to see if they can break free from this cycle of violence and tragedy that consumed their parents, or are they too destined to repeat it? Seeing the visual of Maeve teaching Sam how to float on his own, my mind be seen again at some point. Will we see her letting him go to his freedom and safety, or letting him go because he's dead? I truly hope that it's option one, that we do get to see both Maeve and Sam make it out of this situation without being harmed, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, from one set of kids losing their parents, we shift to Emily visiting her brother Ethan in jail. They make small talk, but beneath the surface, the pain is very present. Emily lies about their dad asking about him all the time, as Ethan doubts this because last time Tom was here, he only dropped off his suit but didn't actually see his son. We see Ethan is taking full responsibility of what happened to their mother. Now, I do wonder how this particular plot will play into the overall narrative. Right now, it seems to be a direct exploration of forgiveness. Can one find a way to forgive someone for such a terrible thing, even though their family and their circumstances being the mental health was involved? I do believe this will be more important to Tom's arc and his family more than the task force elements of the show. This arc is deeply tied to Tom's ability to function. His personal burden, evident in last week's moments where he dismissed Lizzie's idea and also he dismissed the tip calls that came in, clearly impacting his professional focus. To me, until Tom addresses his internal conflict, it will remain a significant distraction from the task force pressing case. Meanwhile, we watch as desperation drives Cliff and Robbie into an increasingly dangerous territory. Cliff believes he's found a solution to their drug problem in Ray, a recently released ex-con and past cellmate. We see in this episode that Ray is a problematic individual. He's, number one, a shitty and abusive husband and a terrible father. To me, these are all qualities that hint at his unreliability and his ruthlessness. Now, Cliff and Robbie provide Ray with the need-to-know information, explaining they stumbled upon these drugs and must move them without going through the established channels like Freddy. Ray in turn suggests someone named Lee Whitehead who allegedly has connections with the Colombians. Now, as we'll later find out in this episode, this was a capital, stupid idea that bites them in the ass later. This move emphasizes the recklessness born of desperation and fear. Cliff and Robbie, with no resources or backup, are walking into a den of wolves. This decision really highlights the profound lack of foresight from these two, as they feel cornered and clearly operating under immense pressure. Now, back on the investigation, we watch as Aaliyah and Lizzie meet with Denny, the guy we saw earlier at Peach's job. Now, Denny wants clarification on this $25,000 reward. He really wants to know if it still applies if Sam is found dead or alive. Denny reveals Peaches had been bragging about hitting houses with Cliff, a name he recognizes from his past working with Cliff before moving on to collecting trash. Aaliyah immediately calls Tom, and now Cliff is squarely on their radar as they now have his home address. We watch as the task force arrives at Cliff's house. Now they notice signs that suggest a break-in, and without waiting for backup, they enter as a unit. Now inside, we watch as two masked figures quickly hide. We watch the team splits up as chaos erupts. We see Tom is ambushed and violently thrown downstairs just before Lizzie freezes, unable to react in time to help him. Now Aaliyah, however, apprehends the other masked individual who turns out to be Shelly, Ray's wife. Now Ray, the other masked figure, starts to flee. Now Tom, having taken a severe blow to the head, begins to hallucinate seeing his dead wife Susan, literal manifestation of his unresolved grief, but also shows us what's on his mind. Now Lizzie, desperate to make amends for her freezing up, she chases after Ray. As she gets into a scuffle with him, she loses her gun. Now just as Ray is about to grab it, Tony arrives, tackling Ray to the ground and making the arrest. So what did that scene just tell us? Number one, Aaliyah and Tony are on point. They can handle this situation. Hostile situations are something they can handle. while on the other hand, Lizzie and Tom, not so much. Again, Tom's mind is clearly elsewhere. Literally, we see him thinking about his wife and everything going on with the case, and then we see the hesitation with Lizzie. That right now seems to be a mystery. Now, my question is, will this uneven team dynamic be important to later on in the season where we're going to see Tom and Lizzie maybe making up for what happened, or is this just proof that they're not a great team because we also know that there's a leak potentially within the team? Now we watch as Cliff and Robbie arrive and they pull up to Cliff's house only to see it being swarmed with police. As again, Cliff's genius idea and Robbie to go along with it has just exploded in their face. As they quickly drive away, not yet realizing that Ray's capture has just completely screwed them over, exposing their entire operation. Now, back at the Dark Hearts bar, we see Perry tries to pry information from Donna at the bar. Donna eventually tells him that Shane's lady mentioned he's been acting different lately. So I'm starting to wonder, is Donna working with Aaron and they're now using Shane as their fall guy for the leak within the Dark Hearts? Now, if this comes to be true, I wonder what would Donna's motives be? Now, to me, it's clear that there's a dislike from Donna on Perry's end, and it kind of stems from what seems to be a very complicated romantic relationship between these two characters, which suggests that she might want to see the Dark Hearts be destroyed. Or perhaps, like Aaron, she had a close relationship with Billy, more of like a motherly bond, and she seeks revenge for his death. Now again, the exact nature between Donna and Perry history remains unclear, but it's evident that this subplot carries significant weight, potentially weaving into the larger themes of revenge and justice within the criminal underworld. Now, back with the task force, we watch as Tom refuses medical attention after suffering a grade 2 concussion, no thanks to Lizzie, as the task force takes turns playing good cop, bad cop as they interrogate Shelley and Ray. It's here we see Emilia, who truly shines, displaying her intuitive empathy. She observes Shelley's fear, realizing the telltale signs of domestic violence from her experience with Ray. As Emilia shares her own past trauma, a brave confession that instantly shatters Shelley's defenses. This raw vulnerability allows Shelley to find a safe space, explaining that Cliff had visited them earlier asking Ray for his help. Now, upon hearing Shelley's confession, Ray realizing he's completely exposed and he begins to sing like a bird. We watch as he cooperates, hoping for leniency, agreeing to set up a meeting with Cliff the following evening to discuss selling the drugs. However, the harsh reality of the situation quickly materializes. Despite his cooperation, Ray is still undoubtedly screwed for physically attacking a federal officer. Meanwhile, Cliff and Robbie discuss their possible escape plan. They discuss heading north near Toronto. It's during this conversation that Ray's text comes through, unknowingly setting in motion the task force trap. Oblivious to Ray's betrayal, they head off to scout the meeting location. Now the narrative shifts to a more personal yet equally vital development. As we watch Lizzie and Tony are at a bar, a seamlessly innocent outing that reveals layers of their characters and hints at future complications. The conversation revolves around Lizzie's freeze-up at Cliff's house. She confesses that this isn't an isolated incident, admitting a long track record of similar failures, which led her to joining the task force. To me, this discussion is potentially setting the stage for a critical decision Lizzie will have to make, potentially involving Tony. A moment where she might have to rise above her past anxieties. Now, adding to the scene, some of Lizzie's old troopers appear, poking fun of her, further emphasizing her past struggles. Now, we watch as Tony steps in as he delivers his uplifting speech, clowning her former colleagues and also reminding Lizzie of her capabilities. Now, I feel like one of these characters are just destined to die. Now, we know in this scene that both Lizzie and Tony are single, and a romantic connection between the two seems to be going on. This blossoming relationship, however, could drastically complicate matters, especially if my theory holds true. In this scene, we see Tony abruptly leaves, rushing off to meet someone. This sudden departure just adds more to my suspicions, as his words in his speech about honorable law enforcement seem to be a little too on the nose. It might be a possible red herring, or perhaps a glaring sign that he is the leak. Now, as we come to an end of this episode, back at Tom's house, we see Emilia dropping him off. We watch as his older daughter, Sarah, apologizes for the other night at the family dinner. Sarah tells her father that she doesn't want to watch him turn into her mother, who was consumed by taking care of Ethan 24/7. As we see, Tom tells Sarah that he doesn't want Ethan back and he can't forgive Ethan for what he did. Meanwhile, Emily is outside and hears this entire conversation. This ongoing focus on Tom's fractured family is all about finding forgiveness and healing. Tom isn't the only one trapped in this cycle. Robbie can't forgive Jason, nor can Aaron. Their inability to let go of past grievances isn't just a personal struggle, it's the anchor of this series, highlighting how unresolved trauma clouds judgment, leading to poor decisions for themselves and those around them. Now, it's here we get a brief but critical flashback to the day Tom and Susan welcome little Emily and Ethan into their family through adoption. This joyful memory serves as a powerful counterpoint to Tom's current bitterness. It's a reminder of the love and hope that once filled their home, and perhaps a subtle message to Tom. Susan, who loved Ethan and Emily unconditionally, would never want Tom to abandon a child who has already experienced a life of abandonment through the foster system. To me, this flashback this deep in the emotional stakes, framing Tom's eternal struggle and his eternal conflict as a possible feeling of betrayal of his late wife to their family. Now, as we cut to the next morning, Joe arrives at Tom's house to give him news that there's a leak within the task force. But before that, he tells Tom that the person Jason killed about the rule violation was Billy. But again, he's not here to discuss that, which to me is obviously an oversight because with that information, they would have been able to look into Billy's family history and link it back to Robbie. But Joe shows Tom footage of a member of the Dark Hearts who's a lieutenant sitting outside Cliff's house. But the question is, how would a Dark Heart lieutenant know about Cliff? Because there's a leak. As our last scene shows Tom arriving to HQ and he's left to wonder, who can he trust now within his task force?
She was gonna take the kids. She's gonna leave me.
I know. Get out.
Not knowing when something is over can lead to some bad decisions. Decisions that have ruined some of these characters' lives forever. For example, Billy not knowing to end his affair with Aaron and Jason finding out and not accepting the fact that Aaron didn't want to be in their relationship anymore, all led to him brutally killing Billy, setting off a chain of events that we're watching unfold. Welcome back, where today I'll be breaking down episode 4 of Task, titled All Roads. In this episode, we see how these characters' bad decisions have caught up to them as we say goodbye to Cliff. We also finally get the answer to who's the mole within the task force, or did we? We've got a lot to talk about in this episode, so let's discuss it and break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. As the title implies, we open this episode with seeing the road as Tom is driving while trying to remember the path that led him to this point where he doesn't know who he can trust. As he's replaying what Joe told him in last week's episode that he has a mole in his team and how he was told to suspect everyone. As we cut to Tom being introduced to Tony's chief by the name of Michael Dorsey. Inside, Tom wastes no time. He briefs a group of volunteers from Anthony's department on their primary targets, which are Cliff and his unknown accomplice. The game plan is laid out, and everyone is instructed to be on high alert. This includes Tom himself, who wrestles with the terrifying possibility that every detail shared could be shared with the Dark Hearts by their eternal leak. Now, it's important to note that Aaliyah shows Ray's phone to everybody. Now, knowing what we find out later, I'm to assume that this is the actual phone and it hasn't been switched out at this point in the episode. Meanwhile, Cliff displaced after the police raid on his house, he's now staying with Robbie. Paying attention to this small but critical detail, Cliff tells Robbie that he couldn't sleep, a detail that becomes critical later in this episode. Robbie has already set the wheels in motion for their escape to Canada, confirming a meeting with his connect Bartos later that day. It's here we get to see up close and personal on just how the relationship goes between Perry, who's now at Donna's house, as he's looking through old photo albums dating back to 2017 shootout. He's doing this to maybe get some clues to who's their mole inside the Dark Hearts. Now, their relationship seems to be dictated by Perry coming and going as he pleases. Basically, he's a hookup buddy, and Donna calls him out on this behavior. Now, even though we see Donna and Perry having this little morning routine, I still have a feeling that she's involved with Aaron and Billy's situation, and I think she might be looking for a way to have Perry be taken out as well. Now, we see Perry spots a picture of Billy and Maeve, but he dismisses it without a second thought. Remember that for later. Now, Perry receives a message from Vincent, who's letting him know that he's outside. Now it's here we gain a significant insight into the eternal workings of the dark hearts. Now Perry shares his suspicions about their mole from within and that someone's making the situation personal and they may have ties to Jason, but he has yet to figure it out. Now you can just tell that Vincent's an important guy and he has high ranks by the way he's talking to Perry as he tells Perry about the recent conversation with the Mother Club and they basically want Jason out. Vincent yells at Perry after he asks for more time, but it's too late. This hit has been made for Friday and there's nothing Perry can do about it regardless of how he feels about Jason. Now this conversation charged by Vincent's authority to me implies that the Mother Club is not only targeting Jason but also potentially Perry for having placed Jason in charge to begin with. Now my question is, will Perry intervene to what's going to happen to Jason on Friday or will he just let it happen? Now cutting to Emily, we see her with her school counselor again and we hear her talk about Sarah's relationship with both her mom and her brother Ethan before the tragedy happened. She recalls Sarah's ultimatum. Either Ethan goes or she goes.
And she said that if they continued to live in Ethan's war zone, that's what she called it, a war zone.
Now Emily, despite her loyalty to her brother, she understands Sarah's desire to reclaim the happiness their family had before Emily and Ethan entered the picture. Emily shares how she feels she's supposed to always have this sense of appreciation and gratitude as an adopted child. This feeling often prevented her from expressing her other more complex emotions, as the counselor gently reminds Emily that her adoption wasn't her choice and she shouldn't have to carry this burden of this unfortunate situation. Now look, I can acknowledge perhaps this particular plot might not be the most compelling for some of you all out there. To me, this plotline theme is the true heart of the show. To me, this whole subplot kind of dives into the consequences of individual mistakes. From Ethan's actions destroying his family, to Billy's relationship with Aaron leading to his death at Jason's hands, which in turn sparked Robbie's robberies. The episode's title, All Roads, perfectly encapsulates this theme. It's an exposition of human emotion, forgiveness, and how profound love can persist even amongst unimaginable pain. Now it's here that we return to Tom, who briefs Kathleen on a leak within the task force. Kathleen, however, remains unconvinced, dismissing the notion and insisting they proceed as usual. But here's the problem. The moment Tom leaves, we watch Kathleen pull out her cell phone, not her work phone, and makes a call stating that we have a problem. Now, let's play devil's advocate. Kathleen could simply be calling her higher-ups within the department about this potential leak and getting an internal investigation started, but again, the use of her personal cell phone rather than the official line strongly suggests that she's bypassing official channels to communicate with an unseen party. Now, with all that said, giving credit where credit is due, I don't have the names in front of me right now, but I mentioned it in my past breakdowns how some of you all in the comments section have called out that Kathleen is the leak, and goddammit, you all called it, you all were right, and my Tony suspicions can go to rest, at least for now. Some of you all have mentioned in the comments that maybe it's a member of the task force, but instead it might be Kathleen. Theory being that she's been forced to retire recently and she's maybe secretly working with the Dark Hearts and making money on the side to feed them information. Now later in the episode, we get more evidence to Kathleen being the leak a little bit later, but if she is indeed the mole, the burning question remains, who will be the one to expose her? Now speaking of leak, back to Perry, he pays a visit to Shane. Shane tells Perry how things have been different since Billy's death and how a lot of members within the Dark Hearts weren't happy by how things went down between Jason and Billy, and that being that Jason killed Billy. This whole time, Perry was under the assumption of this story. Billy was said to have stolen money from the Dark Hearts, leading to his demise. However, Shane, grappling with this troubled conscience, reveals the truth. The real motive for Billy's murder was the affair with Aaron, which Jason discovered. Now, Shane's timing is key here. As he suggests, the recent string of robberies has made them feel like they're cursed. Now, in my eyes, if you're Perry, this lie demands Jason to be removed. Yet, we see Perry wrestling with the same confusing thoughts that plague Tom and Emily. They're all struggling with this inability to abandoning a loved one, despite the clear and escalating danger they pose. This loyalty, while misguided, seems to be Perry's fatal flaw that can potentially lead to his downfall. Now, following last week's Tom flashback, episode 4 gives us a glimpse into the past through Robbie's eyes back when Billy was alive. This scene is bright and happy and centered on the family in the water, a visual symbol of Billy's unifying presence. Now we watch as everyone's having fun except for Robbie's wife Karen, who looks like she would rather be anywhere else but here. Now we watch as Billy and Robbie talk about Robbie's relationship issues and how Karen told him that she feels like she's suffocating in a relationship, but also feels like she's suffocated by their kids. Now, Robbie knows his relationship is over, but he's afraid to leave his wife despite the fact that Karen's been left this relationship, as Billy even points this out. Now, this, like last week's flashback, is brief, but it tells us so much about these relationships. You can see how Billy was basically the glue that kept his family together, and Robbie valued his opinion and looked up to Billy in a way, even though Billy himself wasn't a perfect man, as we see Aaron arrives. Robbie mentions how he thought their relationship was over, but Billy tells him he tried, but clearly he didn't try hard enough. From the flashback to the present scene was a seamless, powerful cut from this bright memory to the dark, hopeless presence where we find Cliff and Sam in the water, establishing the heavy toll Billy's death have taken on Robbie's emotional state. Now, Robbie gets a text from Bartos to meet up. Now, before leaving, it's here that Sam tells Robbie he's ready to go home, this setting off alarms for both Robbie and Cliff, adding more pressure to the situation. Now, Robbie meets with his connect, leaving Cliff and Sam alone in the car. Now, as I mentioned earlier, exhausted from the troubles, we see Cliff takes a nap. In doing so, Sam decides to get out of the car to release the fish they caught earlier. Now, Sam attempts this simple act of compassion while this concerned man approaches, questioning Sam's lack of supervision. Now, Robbie returns and immediately panics because he doesn't know where Sam is. But not much long after, Sam and the guy arrive, and the guy asks Robbie if he's Sam's father. Now, Robbie instinctively shouts yes, while Sam states no. We watch as the guy grabs Robbie, but takes a photo before Robbie starts beating him up. Cliff has to grab Robbie off the guy and throws his phone into the woods, but the damage is already done. Now, not to make excuses for Robbie, but I would imagine he was boiling inside and this was just a moment for him to finally explode. Now, I still think that Sam's connections with the deer will come into play at some point, but here, seeing Sam's connection to this helpless fish is just an example of how I feel his empathy, while noble, will be a critical component for either Sam getting hurt or killed, or in this case, almost getting Robbie caught. Now, the boiling anger continues as Perry, with a chain wrapped around his hand, confronts Jason at Donna's bar. Now we watch as Perry punches Jason in the face, and this natural sense of violence between them seems to be very common. Jason shares the news with tonight's meeting with Cliff, but more importantly, he reveals why he actually killed Billy to Perry. Erin was not just going to leave him, she was going to take the kids. Think about how Robbie has made sense of justifying his robberies. Now, look at Jason's justification. In his mind, it's rooted in protecting his status as a father and keeping his family together. Again, this is just another example in my eyes how these characters' bad decisions are finally catching up with them. Now again, kind of similar to Sam's empathy, this scene shows us the danger of Perry's empathy. To me, Jason kind of knows how to manipulate Perry, and I think Perry kind of knows this, but he uses his family as an excuse for his actions. Perry's willingness to process and forgive this depth of deception to me suggests that his loyalty towards Jason is indeed the crisis point that will eventually catch up to him as well. Now, in the background, two important subplots continue. We see Tom furthers his investigation into the mole by questioning Tony about his entry into the force, keeping his internal threat alive. Meanwhile, we see Emilia at work, and call it pure pressure or simply just wanting to be a teenager and not having to think about her life at the moment, we see she joins her co-workers and heads off to a party. For me, this points to a form of escapism within this family. Thinking about Sarah having these large bottles of red wine, or thinking about Tom and his alcohol problems, seeing her own father and her sister relying on alcohol for temporary relief, Emily turns to drinking herself. Now, finding Emily drunk later in this episode, I really hope this isn't setting up Emily continuing to drink and it causing her to making a decision that could have major repercussions. Now, back at Robbie's, he tells Maeve the plan he set up for them to leave across the border after they receive the money tonight. Now, Maeve calls out all the things that won't be available to them and the kids down where Robbie wants to go, and she tells him straight up that she nor the kids will be coming.
You're not going to ruin their lives just because you ruined yours.
and gives him till morning to figure out what to do with Sam, or else she'll go and take care of it herself. Now, last week and this week, we didn't get a ton of Maeve, which is kind of unfortunate because I really like this character, but I have a feeling that we're going to get more of her next week. Now, speaking of ruining lives, Perry pays a visit to Erin while she's cooking dinner for her kids. By the way, knowing that Jason and Erin had kids together, because it was kind of up in the air in the last few episodes if she was just a girlfriend or if she was the mother of his children, and like I said, we just got that confirmed this episode, this just only adds more context to their relationship. And also, Perry is seen and is called uncle from these kids, which just adds to the fact that him and Jason are basically family. Now, Perry cuts straight to the heart of their marital problems and infidelity. Now, Erin admits to her having a thing with Billy, but quickly throws Jason's own affairs back in his face. However, Perry zeroes in on her threat to leave with the kids, highlighting the emotional leverage she held. He then pivots, giving her a chance to come clean about her potential involvement in the recent robberies. Now, Erin tries to play coy, but Perry basically lays out her entire plan.
Destroy his business, right? Ruin it so bad that the Mother Club sends me in to clean it up, get rid of him. You can fly away free as a bird, right?
Now, Perry grabs her by the throat, demanding the truth. But Erin, despite the pressure, doesn't break. She looks him in the eye and tells him that she had nothing to do with the robberies. Now, Perry then offers her a way out. A way to leave Jason and disappear with the kids somewhere that he'll never find them. But Erin doesn't take it, at least not yet. You know, thinking about seeing these parents putting their children at risk based on their bad decisions seems to be one of the themes in this episode. As we cut to Robbie dressed up, having fun with Harper's daughter in preparation for their father and daughter dance, which is coming up. Watching this scene and the previous scene with Erin and seeing the distinct differences from them being in parent mode and them being in fight or flight mode within minutes of each other. Think about this. Robbie just beat the hell out of a guy earlier in the episode and was just upstairs telling Maeve about leaving the country. Then compare that to Erin cooking dinner, helping her kids with their homework, and then being asked, and within minutes later, if she had anything to do with the recent robberies and if she's plotting to have her husband killed. Again, the stark contrast between the fight or flight and the parent modes underlines the immense pressure these characters are under. Now we get this heartfelt moment here where Harper tells Robbie that she's scared and she knows something's going on with her father and he's not telling her. And the feeling she has is similar to the one she felt when their mother left. Now this feeling of uncertainty led to Harper not buying a ticket for them to go to the dance because she thought her father wouldn't be interested. Now what follows is a beautiful and possibly bittersweet dance in their kitchen as Maeve watches from her room. I read Maeve watching them as her imagining and wishing that she could dance with her father, who we know is no longer with her. I also think that Maeve is maybe starting to understand why Robbie can't leave his kids and why she might not want to take them away from him. This again to me truly felt like this could be the last dance between Robbie and his daughter, as everything is finally catching up with Robbie. Now, all roads have indeed led to this as we head over to the drug meetup. But first, we get a small moment of levity between Leah and Lizzie, highlighting their potential friendship and Aaliyah's impressive shooting skills, a detail I believe will definitely come back full circle at some point. Now, Kathleen arrives in a van with Tom, observing the exchange. She mentions not hearing anything about the possible mole and looks at him with a suspicious look, and this again could point to her being the leak. As Cliff and Robbie arrive in separate cars, we see Cliff pulls up, or at least who Tom thinks is Cliff, as Tom makes a critical decision to stop the car. Now, unfortunately, it turns out to be a couple looking for the dog, a major misdirection. Meanwhile, Cliff texts what he believes is Ray's phone, but it goes directly to Jason. Now, before breaking down what happens next, let's see if we're all on the same page here. Now, assuming that Kathleen is indeed the leak, which all evidence in this episode points towards that, are we to believe that she stole the phone from evidence and gave it to Jason at some point since last night when Ray was arrested? Also, back to Tony, again, that's not Ray's phone. You'll notice he seems to be using some other phone that uses the same network to access Cliff. But again, I'm going back to last week's episode. Ray said that him and Cliff would normally communicate via Snapchat, so maybe that's why we don't see any previous messages exchanged on the phone that Tony's currently using. Now, as I digress, sadly, the road that led Cliff to reaching out to Ray has led him to this ambush. As Cliff thinks the buyer is approaching, it's actually Perry and Jason. Now they rear in Cliff, who instinctively smashes his phone before desperately telling Robbie to leave. We watch as Cliff is chased off the road, and then we see Robbie frantically searching for him but has no luck. Now back with the force, we see Tom looks on in frustration, still convinced that one of his own teams ruined this ambush, while Kathleen watches silently from behind him. Now, so that we're all on the same page, we're all in agreement that Kathleen is the mole, right? Or, again, let's play devil's advocate, is it just a show toying with us? I mean, the call in her office, the look she's giving Tom throughout this episode just seems too obvious. She's the leak. Or is she? I'm just still hung up on the fact on when did she take Ray's phone from evidence. The reason I bring that up is the only characters we physically saw with that phone was Tony and Tom when they took it from Ray, and at the start of this episode in the evidence bag Aaliyah was holding. Again, is the show throwing us for the loop, or is it confirming that Kathleen is indeed the leak? Now, taking a breath from the intense chase scene that we just got, we switch gears to week 2 of Tony and Lizzie at the bar. This time around, they hit the dance floor, and the nickname Lizzie gave him is about to change, or at least he thinks is about to change, as they share a kiss and they head back to her place. Now, in the middle of an intimate moment, Tony stops. He expresses discomfort doing it in the same bed Lizzie shared with her ex-husband. Now, they have a laugh about this, and I'm assuming they had sex somewhere else in the house, but my guess is he stopped because he mentioned how the bed is a sacred place, and with all the conversations he's had with Tom and religion, maybe he stopped because of his religious beliefs, or maybe he's thinking about becoming a priest himself after all of this. Now, I predicted a romantic relationship between these two a couple weeks ago, and it's finally coming into fruition. However, I'm even more convinced that one of them will end up dead. Things are just going too good for them, and knowing the creators behind Mayor of Easttown are behind this show, and remembering what happened to the last police officers in a romantic relationship there, now my money is unfortunately on Lizzie potentially dying at some point. Thinking about her freezing up in last week's episode and her lack of specialized skills like Aaliyah, it feels like a tragic build-up to her either trying to save Tony, and maybe she does so, or she fails at doing so by not taking action, causing her to have a tragic ending. Now, as we come to an end of this episode, we return to Tom's house where Emily returns drunk. The tables have turned, with Tom now caring for his drunk daughter, and it's not the other way around. As Emily finally breaks down, having overheard Tom's conversation with Sarah the night before, and basically taking advice from her school counselor from earlier. She feels she can't express herself without shame, believing she should be grateful for being adopted, convinced that she and Ethan ruined their family. Now, from one tragic family to another, we see that Jason and Perry have kept Cliff alive and want to question him about what he knows, but also they want to know where the rest of the drugs are that are missing. Now, Cliff has been brutally beaten up, almost unrecognizable and barely able to speak. Yet, in defiance, he spits in Jason's face, refusing to give up Robbie. For a split second there, I thought that he was going to say that maybe Aaron was involved to kind of get back on Aaron, but again, if he did that, obviously it would lead back to Robbie. Now, Jason, without hesitation, wraps saran wrap over Cliff's face, slowly killing him. I do wonder, did Jason lose his temper in that moment, or was he simply just figuring out that he wasn't going to get anything from Cliff? Honestly, though, I think killing Cliff was a bit premature on their end, and also Perry just sitting there watching that happen. Will Vincent have any thoughts about this, or the other members of the Mother Club? Would they want to have kept Cliff alive so they can get as much information out of him? Either way, we do have to say goodbye to a character in this episode, and that is indeed Cliff. Again, think about how the road has led him to this point. If he would have never got Ray involved, he might still be alive. Now, he's dead. Another person close to Robbie, gone. Speaking of Robbie, we cut to him with the rest of the drugs as we see him tearing up. Now the question is, what does Robbie do with these drugs, and what does he do with Sam? As our final shots cut between Tom and Perry, both discovering something of critical importance. Tom is meticulously shifting through the team's files, desperately trying to unmask the mole. Now at the same time, Perry's doing his own detective work. He finds the same picture of Billy and Mae from earlier, and the detail emerges. Billy was holding the same gun Cliff had, as Perry is starting to connect the dots that Billy and Cliff knew each other, and he sets his sights on Maeve. Now to cap off this episode, Tom receives a call from Emilia. She shares the photo taken from the guy Robbie beat up earlier, confirming Sam is alive, but also revealing a glimpse of Robbie's face. As this net of lies, deception, regret, and bad decision making is tightening on everyone.
Vagrant. It's a bird that's strayed outside its normal range, strayed so far that it's forgotten how to find its way home. Most of them don't survive. Saying, Robbie, you could still go home.
Robbie's gone too far, and the chances of him surviving all this are coming close to being impossible. But if there's one thing certain, he's set on getting his revenge on Jason and killing him before it's all said and done. Welcome back. Today we are here to break down episode 5 of TAS titled Vagrants. In this episode, we finally get to see the meeting between Tom and Robbie. Meanwhile, Perry makes a decision that he regrets, and ladies and gentlemen, we officially meet the real leak within the task force. We've got so much to talk about in this episode. I'm so excited to be back with you all, so let's discuss it all and break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. The episode opens in a dream as we return to the quarry. This location, originally a symbol of innocence and tradition through Robbie and Billy's ritual, is now a flashpoint of pain and guilt, reminding Robbie of the celebration he shared with Peaches and the recently murdered Cliff. Waking up in anger, Robbie is looking for Ray, believing him to be the one who set them up. Instead, he finds Shelly, who delivers the news that Ray has been in jail for the last 2 days and that the FBI is now involved and they were the one that were texting Cliff. Now at this point, Robbie doesn't know that Cliff is dead. Shelly offers to help move the drugs, and her motivation being that she needs the money to help her escape Ray before he potentially posts bail. Robbie doesn't take her up on her offer as he leaves. For now, the Ray and Shelly storyline appears to be closed, but I am curious if we'll swing back to Shelly at the end and maybe Aaliyah helps her out in some capacity and find a new place to live far away from Ray. Now back with the task force, the investigation gains traction. They've identified Robbie's connect, Bartos, and are meeting with the witness, Alex, whom Robbie assaulted in last week's episode. Tom instructs Alex to be as meticulously detailed for the sketch artist, tightening the neck around Robbie's identity. Now, a small yet critical detail is planted here. Tom learns that Sam was not in distress. Alex recounts seeing Sam seamlessly normal releasing a fish. This detail is the first seed of doubt regarding Robbie's presumed inherent criminality. It suggests to Tom that this suspect, while dangerous, may not align with the typical profile of a violent offender, setting the stage for a potential shift in their future confrontation later in this episode. Now it's here that we get clarity on Caitlin's actions in last week's episode. A brief but significant scene confirms that the mysterious phone call that she made last week was not to a Dark Heart ally, but instead it was to a subordinate by the name of Connor requesting information on her task force members. Now remember what I said last week. What if that phone call she made was to someone in the department to investigate the team versus it being a Dark Heart person, and she was not the leak that the episode made her out to be? Now let's play devil's advocate. Kathleen could simply be calling her higher ups within the department about this potential leak and getting an internal investigation started. Now we'll talk about the reveal a little bit later, but as far as this scene goes, I don't foresee the show pulling the rug from underneath us yet again and showing fact that she was maybe an additional mole or additional leak. So I'm convinced this scene confirmed that Kathleen is not and was not the leak. Instead, she was intelligently and discreetly investigating the internal corruption she suspected at play that was brought to her by Tom. Now, back at Jason and Aaron's house, after what I'm assuming they just got done burying Cliff's body, we see Detective Perry plants a tracker on Aaron's car. Meanwhile, inside, Aaron's attention fixes on the bloodstain on Jason's shirt. Now, I read this as a psychological trigger. The sight of her husband covered in blood likely serves as a grim echo, reminding her of the trauma associated with losing Billy at the hands of Jason. The blood kind of acts like a visceral link between Jason's past violence and his present actions. Now, at Robbie's, one of the episode's most tense sequences unfolds as we see Maeve and Sam having breakfast. Now, Sam's not ready to leave, despite saying that he was ready to go home in last week's episode. Now, as Sam goes outside to say goodbye to the chickens, Perry knocks on the front door and enters, and Maeve has to put on a poker face and not show just how shocked but also nervous she must be in this moment. Now we watch as Perry puts on this kind uncle act, and he makes up this story to why he's here. He says this is going to be a ceremony for the fallen brothers, including her dad, Billy. Now, just like in episode 2, we watch Maeve be quick on her feet. She has Perry go around back to get some of Billy's stuff to avoid him seeing Sam. Now, as Perry looks through Billy's belongings in the garage, it allows Maeve time needed to successfully hide Sam in the chicken coop. Now, I mentioned episode 2, and remembering how tense and anxious that moment was at the end of that episode, and here we're less than 10 minutes in, and I had a very similar feeling while watching Maeve navigate this situation. Now, back inside, Perry sees Maeve feeding the chickens, and things seem normal. Until he looks at the refrigerator and sees a picture of Cliff, who he just watched get murdered the night before, in a picture with Robbie. Now, this discovery is diffused when Perry's phone buzzes with a notification from the tracker showing Aaron is on the move. Now, Perry asks Maeve about Robbie's whereabouts, and she tells him that she hasn't seen him in a few days, and as he leaves, he kisses her on the forehead and tells her to remember that they're still family. Obviously, Aaron's movement detracts Perry's immediate focus, saving Maeve from more questioning for now. As he leaves, we watch Maeve catch her breath. I don't know which moment had me more stressed, episode 2 or this moment, but sticking with Maeve, we see her with Sam in the car as she meets with her friend from work who sees that she has Sam and she knows that she's going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, Maeve asks her friend to look after Robbie's kids as she tries to figure out what to do with Sam. Now, if Maeve's situation wasn't dire enough, we see the task force makes a major breakthrough. Aaliyah confirms that the second DNA sample pulled from the bucket that Sam used belongs to Maeve. Aaliyah further indicates Maeve as the daughter of Billy, a former lieutenant in the Dark Hearts. Now, as Leah is telling Tom this, he recalls the name Billy from Joe's past accounts, connecting the dots. Tom now understands that the line between the investigation and the world of the Dark Hearts are now colliding. We see the wheels are turning, and he is now off to confront Maeve. Now, I'm not sure if Tom recognized or realized or even remembers that he met Maeve back in episode 2, but based on this interaction, I don't think he remembers. Now, going back to Aaliyah telling Tom that information, we just learned that Billy was a lieutenant, which to me adds even more context to Jason killing him, because I would bet his rank meant that he was important, but also maybe he was considered to be untouchable. So if a lieutenant was murdered, I can now understand why some other members, like McShane, weren't on board with that decision. I also wonder if some of the members wish that Billy led the Dark Hearts and not Jason, potentially causing more conflict within the Dark Hearts. Now, back with Robbie, he meets up with Erin, who we know her car is being traced by Perry, who's headed their way without either one of them knowing. Now, at the quarry, Erin tells Robbie, who's still trying to figure out how the FBI are now involved, she tells him that Jason was covered in blood, and Robbie knows what that means. As we watch him start to cry, understanding that Cliff, his best friend and brother figure, is now dead. The raw emotion as Robbie breaks down, understanding that Jason has now taken not only his biological brother Billy, who he loved, but also the man considered his closest friend and also his brother, is just heartbreaking. Now, despite Erin's advice to holding off on moving the drugs, Robbie, fueled now by grief and desperate need for control, he has other plans. As he leaves Erin, setting a dangerous chain of events in motion. Now, I normally don't spend too much time really highlighting these individual great performances, because if I did that, these breakdowns would be over 2 hours long. There are moments where I have to edit these down a lot because I like to go into the little details, little nuances furthermore. And plus, I think it's kind of obvious how incredible these performances are in every single episode, but I want to take a moment to break down this scene. I first took notice of Tom Pelphrey when he was in an awful television series by the name of Iron Fist, and he really didn't make much of an impression on me in that particular performance. It wasn't until he came in like a nuclear bomb in season 3 of Ozark as Ben, that's when I saw how incredibly talented he was. I say all that to say this. This scene of him going from crying after knowing Cliff is dead to him switching into the mindset of rage and even more vengeance to kill Jason, to me, that was next level acting. I will go as far to say that I could see that scene being a clip being played when his name is mentioned as a nominee for Best Lead Actor in a limited series. Now, back to the episode. Meanwhile, Perry Mason makes his way toward Erin and talk about terrible timing because Perry just so happens to see Robbie drive past him as the tracker takes him exactly to where Erin is. Now, it doesn't take a genius to connect the dots. Perry has seen the picture of Cliff and Robbie. Now he sees Robbie driving away from the very person he's tracking. He's now found the leak. For Perry, the case of who portrayed the club is now closed. Now, he surprises Erin, reminding her of the clean way out that he offered. This being a reference to how I read the scene in the kitchen in last week's episode, where I know some of you all thought that he was threatening to kill her and the kids. Now, his intentions are much clearer and far more sinister. Now, he grabs Erin, stating that they have to go a different route now, but we see she flees, plunging into the quarry water, and like a psycho shark, Perry dives in after her. We see Erin tries to fight and she screams for help, but the distant music of the other people in the quarry drowns out her cries. As we watch, Perry catches up with her and holds her under the water to silence her. And in a shocking moment, Perry drowns and kills Erin. Now, his immediate reaction suggests that this wasn't his primary intention. It appears he wanted to take her alive and perhaps have Jason or let the Mother Club decide her fate, or even use her maybe to help Jason before Friday's literal deadline. I also want to mention how ironic it is that Erin dies at the place where she used to be happy and be with Billy, and now again it's a place in where she dies. Now I also want to mention before moving on, what exactly did Perry do with Erin's body? We saw him carrying her away, but did he bury her in the woods somewhere, or did he transport her in his trunk to a more discreet location? Either way, this undoubtedly sets up the stage for a major confrontation between Perry and Jason if Jason ever discovers Erin's fate. Now, shifting gears, we get the return of Freddy. Robbie, desperate and ignoring the fact that both Perry and Jason have already spoken with Freddy, he seeks him out. To me, maybe Robbie's thought process is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Now, we watch as Freddy's nephew suggests some different ideas of what they should do next. One of the options being kill Robbie, take the drugs, which in return would start a gang war with them and the Dark Hearts. But we see Freddy, the seasoned OG that he is, wants to play the long game. He instructs his nephew to call Jason, demanding everything since he now holds the man responsible for all the recent chaos. As Freddy welcomes Robbie to the table, and the details of the conversation remain unseen, and we don't see Freddy for the rest of this episode. Now, we've watched Robbie make some incredibly rash and quite frankly stupid decisions throughout this show. But this meeting felt different, and I feel will come back into play either next week or in the finale. I think Robbie may have made some deal that will either save him in the shootout that we see being set up later in this episode, or maybe he set something up that may help his kids out financially when everything's all said and done. Now for the moment many of us have been waiting for. Now last week, I almost gave in and started to wave the white flag, and I had halfway bent the knee to the idea of Kathleen being the leak within the task force. But if you saw my breakdown, I kept one foot firmly in the Tony is the leak camp. Same page, we're all in agreement that Kathleen is the mole, right? Or again, let's play devil's advocate. Is it just a show toying with us? I mean, the call in her office, the look she's given Tom throughout this episode just seems too obvious. She's the leak. Or is she? I'm just still hung up on the fact on when did she take Ray's phone from evidence. The reason I bring that up is the only characters we physically saw with that phone was Tony and Tom when they took it from Ray, and at the start of this episode in the evidence bag Aaliyah was holding. Again, is the show throwing us for the loop, or is it confirming that Kathleen is indeed the leak? The show purposefully didn't definitively say that she's 100% the mole, so there's still a chance that it could be someone else, and you all know my money's still on Tony. And ladies and gentlemen, look what we have here. Now, as Tom and Tony exchange updates over the phone, and once the call ends, we see Tony meeting someone under the bridge, and it's Jason. Meaning that my theory and my prediction from the very beginning of Tony being the mole has come to fruition. Look, I'm not going to pat myself on the back too much because we still got 2 episodes to go, but all I'm saying is Tom and Perry aren't the only detectives in this show. Now it's here we also get clarity on the mysterious phone situation that had me super confused last week. Tony took the phone from the evidence and swished it out before giving it to Jason. Now Tony is visibly upset to learn that the drugs are still missing, but confirms to Jason that Sam is indeed still alive. Now during this exchange, Jason takes a call from Freddy about Robbie, and while that's happening, we see Tony receives a text from Lizzie, maintaining his good guy facade. Now Tony immediately recognizes the danger knowing Tom is closing in on Robbie. He warns Jason to stay away from Robbie to avoid getting caught up with the FBI and losing the $1.5 million worth of drugs. Now let's kind of analyze this scene here, because to me it kind of highlights that this isn't a 50-50 partnership. Tony takes orders from Jason. Now, I hope that we get a better understanding of how this relationship started to begin with, and just how long has Tony been a corrupt cop. It makes me think about the scene at the bar talking about other corrupt cops. So there's so much more to explore with this relationship. And speaking of relationship, I wonder if he really cared for Lizzie, and if those conversations that he had with Tom in the car about religion and being a priest, if all that was real or if it was just part of his act. All right, let's cool off and take a break from all the murdering and betrayals and check in with Aaliyah and Lizzie, whom budding friendship continues to develop. Aaliyah shares a deeply personal story about how she lost her sense of smell due to her abusive ex, who is now working as an HVAC tech in Charlotte. She tells Lizzie that she does check in on him monthly, pretending to be from the DA's office to assure that he isn't abusing anyone else. Now, I said it back when Lizzie froze and helping Tom before getting thrown down the stairs a few episodes back, but I think this is all setting up something between these two characters. Stick with me here with my kind of crazy prediction. Now that Tony is confirmed as the leak, I believe Aaliyah, who is said to be a good shot, will either be tested by having to shoot someone of importance, or most likely saving Lizzie in doing so. Or the other way around, Lizzie will be forced to shoot and kill Tony, perhaps while he's threatening Aaliyah, making a shot she couldn't have dared to make before. Robbie's back at home after meeting with Freddie, not having a clue about Aaron being dead. Jason knows about the meeting, and oh yeah, now Tom's outside his house. Now Tony calls Tom and he's trying to make him not engage because he doesn't want those drugs to be taken in by the FBI, aka 1.5 million worth of drugs being seized. But Tom doesn't listen as he approaches Robbie. Now, I can't think of a one-for-one comparison to my level of anticipation to compare to, but the only thing that's coming to mind right now is the incredible Michael Mann film by the name of Heat, which in that film we had classic iconic legends in Robert De Niro and Al Pacino finally meeting in the film in the diner scene. Now, obviously, much different situation, but similar in the sense of a policeman chasing a criminal and the two main characters finally meeting. Either way, this is the moment we've all been waiting for from the start of the very first episode, which showed us, and throughout the season, we've been seeing their two paths of the season that have led them to finally coming to this point. Now, Tom plays it safe, introducing himself as an FBI agent, simply looking to speak to Maeve about following up on her father's case, as we see Robbie grab his gun in his back pocket, just in case things go south. Now, Tom makes his way in the house, stalling for time as he awaits Tony's arrival, as he makes up a story about having new evidence in Billy's case. Now, Tom has Robbie go collect something of Billy's for DNA, and just as he gets the text identifying Robbie, Robbie comes up behind Tom and puts a gun against the back of his head. Now, I don't know if this was meant to be intentional, but I couldn't stop laughing during this super tense moment between these two characters. Between Tom making up some nonsense about new technology and DNA and AI, to Robbie making these comments about Tom hiding a gun up his ass, also talking about him faking peeing and it sounded like he was taking a dump, and calling him a baby giraffe, truly had me laughing my ass off. If anything, this just goes to show us that neither one of them are particularly good at what they do. Robbie's a pretty terrible criminal with a heart of gold, and we have Tom, who's just a guy with a heavy heart and just trying to make it back home to his alcohol and his birds. Now, for the next stretch of the episode, the confined space of the car becomes a confessional. Robbie explains his motivations stemming from Jason's actions against his brother. Through their conversation, we gain insight on Tom's marital history with Susan, and more importantly, Robbie's surprisingly deep relationship with faith in God.
I never once felt God in my life. And I think people want to believe there's more than this, because if this is really all there is, then that's too depressing for some people.
Now remember earlier, Tom was shocked to learn that Sam wasn't hurt and he was just out fishing. And now after talking to Robbie and what he does later, were just all signs pointing towards Robbie being a good man, just made some catastrophically bad choices. And on the other side, I think Robbie could just sense that Tom isn't some hard-nosed agent, but Tom's a resident agent who's also a good guy who used to be a priest. Now, I want to point out that we see Robbie with this duffel bag for the rest of the episode, and we're assuming that the drugs are inside. But Robbie makes a joke to Tom that the bag is full of basketballs. Now, the drugs could definitely be inside, but like I said earlier, I think Robbie has a plan and the drugs aren't in the bag and he's using it as leverage for the meeting that he's headed into. Meanwhile, the focus shifts to collateral damage. Maeve is cooperating at the police station and Sam is now safe. As Maeve and Kathleen chat about how this all started, the conversation is interrupted as Kathleen finds out that Tom is now missing. Now back with Perry, who's now at Donna's, we see that killing Aaron really messed him up both mentally and physically. I can only imagine it has to do with the fact that he just killed the mother and the wife of essentially his son / little brother, making Aaron basically his daughter / sister-in-law. I could be reading it wrong, but I don't think killing comes easy to Perry, and again, I don't think he had intentions on killing her. Now, speak of the devil, Jason calls Perry to fill him in on Robbie and Freddie and the meeting taking place in the evening. And it just so happens Jason also asks him if he's heard from Aaron, and Perry lies as they head out to this meeting. Now, Kathleen has tagged Robbie's car as they go after them. Meanwhile, we see both Sarah and Emily learn of their father's disappearance. Now, if I had any criticism about this episode, it's this scene. As we see Sarah and Emily await to hear the news on their dad, Sarah tells her about her marital issues and being separated from her husband because he cheated on her with a student who she describes as a younger version of herself. As Sarah wants her to not feel the constant pressure of gratitude from what she mentioned in last week's episode. Now look, I get we have to check in on these characters and whatnot, but I didn't feel this particular scene was needed at this point in the episode during all the more important and more compelling moments. The way I would describe how I felt while watching this scene, and again, no disrespect to the acting, and I get what they're doing, but I would describe it as watching a high-speed chase, but the driver in this chase stops at a stop sign to let the ducks cross the road. As I digress, back in the car, Robbie's sighting of a deceased deer prompts a conversation about death and Sam's innocent conversation about saving animals.
You seen people die? Doing last rites and all?
Yes.
Now this conversation leads to the episode's title as a metaphor. Tom describes observing a summer tanager, a bird rarely seen in the area during this season, calling it a vagrant. The bird is a perfect analogy for Robbie, misplaced far from his path and facing a harsh survival scenario. Now, Robbie makes Tom take an exit, which causes Kathleen to lose track of them. Now, it's pretty clear at this point that Robbie sees no other way out of this situation as he's accepted whatever's coming his way, but I do think before whatever happens to him, he's determined to make Jason pay. As we come to a close of this episode, upon arrival at the location, Tom believes that he's about to die, as he pleads to call his children, including sending a message to his son, as he also reveals to Robbie that Susan died. Now, Robbie denies this call, but during this moment, he proves his true character. Instead of killing Tom, he asks him to deliver a message to Maeve. She was innocent and unconnected to all of his crimes committed. Tom gives Robbie his word to make sure that Maeve isn't caught up in all this mess as Robbie lets him go. Now, Robbie has accepted his fate, refusing Tom's final offer to go home, stating that he's lost his path. Again, he lets Tom walk free into the woods where he finds a group of families and calls his daughters to assure he's okay as he's surrounded by chirping birds, which to me was a symbol of him returning to safety. Man, I love seeing Tom and Robbie's interactions in this episode. It was not only brilliant acting between the two, but I couldn't help but to think that maybe in another world or another timeline, Tom and Robbie would have been good friends. Now we end this excellent episode with Robbie at the cabin as Tom now with the rest of the task force and they're headed to the spot where Robbie's car was last pinged. Meanwhile, we see the Dark Hearts have arrived to the cabin. Now, I could be wrong, but is this the same cabin where Billy was murdered, or is that somewhere else completely different? Now, the setup now being that the task force, now suited up and armed, are headed into the hotspot where the meetup is about to happen. Now, you'll notice a little detail, and that's Lizzie, who's behind Tony, is sweating more than the others, indicating that she's extremely nervous, and the question is, will she step up or will she freeze again? Now, we see Robbie isn't at the cabin anymore. He's by the water, performing the quiet ritual to calm his nerves before the confrontation. But this now carefully planned meeting is instantly compromised. The tables are now fully turned. Tom, now armed, appears near Robbie and yells his name, alerting the approaching Dark Hearts. This clearly wasn't a part of Robbie's plans, as he points his gun at Tom, and Tom yells at Robbie that it's over, and we end the episode left to wonder which one of them will potentially shoot first and set off what I think will be a big shootout for next week's episode.
Did you ever hear confession when you were a priest, Tom? Confession's for humans. It's a human practice to help us deal with their shame. Confession's not for God's sake. If you want to be forgiven, all you have to do is ask.
Now, can I make a confession to you all? Because I don't know how to feel about this episode. On one hand, it had me on the edge of my seat, and I may or may not have gotten teary-eyed once or twice while watching certain parts. Then, on the other hand, I said to myself after watching this episode, should this have been the end of the show because the storylines that had my interest are mostly wrapped up, or are they? Welcome back, everybody. Today we are here to break down episode 6, the penultimate episode of Taz, which might have the world record for the longest title episode ever. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a river. In this episode, we say goodbye to some important characters as we watch some of the aftermath from one hell of a shootout that opened the first 20 minutes of this show. We see Maeve gets a blessing from the grave, and Tony might not get out of this as clean as he did in the past. We also see that Perry and Jason may have a very uncomfortable conversation coming up soon. We've got so much to talk about in this episode, so let's discuss it all and break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. We pick things up right where we left off. The Dark Hearts get in position and observe Robbie and Tom, who have their guns pointed at each other. Meanwhile, with Tony and Lizzie, Tony sees that Jason didn't listen to him about not coming to this meeting. As we watch the task force close in on Robbie, joining Tom, we see Perry tells the Dark Hearts to stand down and to back off, knowing that the last thing they want is the FBI to get involved in their operations, but impulsive Jason does the opposite as he shoots at Robbie, igniting a full-blown shootout. Now, the distant sounds of the gunfire reaches Tony and Lizzie. Now, in a moment that might just prove his loyalty to Lizzie despite him being the leak, we see him pulling her closer in, letting her know to stay close to him and to basically lock in. This little moment might be the proof that he actually cared about Lizzie's safety and her well-being in this situation. Now, back in the fray, Perry is frustrated with Jason's decision to dive in head first into the chaos. Now, Jason tells Perry that they're not leaving without the drugs, as he splits the Dark Hearts up in half, where half of them move in, while Perry, with a strained expression, orders the others to pull the trucks around for a tactical retreat. Now, to the woods, we find Tom, who isn't exactly a marksman. He's being pursued and shot at by a Dark Hearts member as he stumbles, falling to the ground. But then we see Robbie appears, and instead of taking a shot at Tom, we see Robbie takes out the Dark Heart member, saving Tom's life. Now, Robbie helps Tom up, leading him to his cabin. Now, in the cabin, Tom raises his gun at Robbie, even though he just saved his life. But Robbie knows that he's out of bullets and tells him that he screwed up his plans by not staying at the lake. Now, during this, Perry and Jason are now outside the cabin as Robbie tells Tom to hide as he follows through with his plan. Now, Perry enters the cabin and Tom intervenes by trying to attack him as they get into a fight. Meanwhile, Robbie sees this and Jason takes a shot at him. Jason's out of bullets as Robbie tosses the bag, which we are to believe is the remains of the $1.5 million worth of drugs, into a stream of water. Now, during all this, we see Kathleen takes a bullet to the shoulder. Now, as I predicted a couple weeks ago, we do see Aaliyah stepping up, proving her reputation as a sharpshooter as she takes down 2 Dark Heart members, saving Kathleen's life. Now, Tony and Lizzie head for the car, and their priority now is to call a medic. Now, as they're heading back to the car, Shane sees this and he follows them. Now, as one of the remaining Dark Heart members prepare to take a shot at Lizzie, we see Tony shoves her out of the way, killing him. But in doing so, we see the gunshot deafens Lizzie, causing her hearing to be compromised. Now, Lizzie notices that Tony is now gone, and I think normally she would have backed down at this point, but since she has this romantic interest in him, she gathers herself and goes after him. Now, back to the main event. We're cutting between Jason stabbing Robbie in the side, and while that's happening, Perry gains the upper hand on Tom, reaching for his gun. But in a surge of adrenaline, we see both Tom and Robbie manage to put their oppositions in a headlock. Now, Tom surprisingly musters up enough strength, and honestly, it's most likely anger that he has built up for everything that's going on in his personal life as we watch him knock out Perry. But in another surprising way, he doesn't handcuff Perry as he goes after Robbie. Now, if you were in the situation, if you were Tom, knowing who Perry is and what he's done in the context of being one of the most influential and most important figures in the gang, do you leave him there like Tom did? Or do you handcuff him to something and return to arrest him later? Or do you shoot and kill him, removing this person from the position of the Dark Hearts? Now, getting to the climax of the Robbie and Jason fight. Robbie, with raw, pure rage, is strangling Jason. You can see it in his eyes as he believes he's finally getting his revenge for his brother Billy. Now, Jason is seen taking what I thought was his last breath, but then Robbie's eyes widen. Jason has stabbed him deep in the stomach as Jason moves to finish Robbie as Tom arrives, chasing him off. As we see Tom rushing Robbie to aid. Now, in the middle of all this chaos, we see Tony find Shane, who tells him that if he has to, he will kill Lizzie, but Tony responds by saying if he does anything to her, he'll kill him. Now, to me, Tony and Shane having this conversation in the middle of this gunfire informs us as an audience that Tony has been around various different members of the Dark Hearts. There wasn't just secret meetings between Jason and Tony, and he wasn't just some unknown faceless informant to some of the members of the gang. It makes me wonder if Tony considered some of the members of the Dark Hearts friends or maybe even family. Well, maybe not family because he did just shoot one of them to save Lizzie. But then we have this moment here. We see Lizzie has a gun pointed at Shane as Tony urges her to hold off. Now, by the way Lizzie's holding the gun so close to her chest, you can tell that this is the part of the job that doesn't come natural to her. This is the part of the job that she probably doesn't like when she freezes up, but also remembering that her hearing is severely impaired. Now, she can't fully grasp what Tony is telling her as Shane pretends to lower his weapon, only to ultimately decide to take a shot at Lizzie. As we see, Lizzie beats him to the draw and she shoots him in the chest. This is where Tony's potential friendship comes into play. He rushes to the wounded Shane, implying pressure, and even Lizzie is kind of looking at him like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Now, again, you could say that Tony was trying to save his life because he is a law enforcement and they probably want to get information from Shane. But again, I took that as Tony was trying to save a friend. Now, Tony notices Jason and Perry in the woods and he waves them off to kind of prevent further escalation as Lizzie, still disoriented, runs to the car to call for the medics. Now, the police finally arrive and Tom, in a desperate attempt to save Robbie's life, heads to the hospital with him. Now, Jason and Perry make it to the truck and are trying to escape, and while that's happening, we see Lizzie reaches the car and calls for backup, and again remembering that her hear loss makes her very vulnerable in this moment. Now, the editing and the sound design here was masterful because it's cutting off the audio to immerse us into Lizzie's position, informing us that she isn't fully aware of her surroundings to what's about to come her way. As Jason and Perry are tearing the road up like bats out of hell, they reach the main bridge. We see Tony and Emilia trying to desperately get the attention of Lizzie to warn her about the speeding truck, but they can't. As Lizzie steps out from the car, we watch the truck with both Jason and Perry sideswipes her. And unfortunately, the impact is brutal and fatal, as Lizzie is dead. Perry and Jason escape as Tony holds her in his arms, telling her that she did a good job as the police arrive and Tony realizes that she's gone. Man, I called it. I knew it was between Tony or Lizzie dying, but unfortunately with Tony having his alliance with the Dark Hearts and guiding Perry and Jason to their truck, it ultimately got Lizzie killed. Meanwhile, in the back of the deputy's car, we watch as Robbie is fading away as he replays the final moments in his head with his kids and Billy and swimming in the quarry, as it looked like he found peace as he slowly fades away and dies. Again, to me, it looked like in that moment that Robbie found his grace in his final moments. Also have to mention that it looked like Tom quietly said a prayer over his body. Again, despite his mistakes, Tom knew Robbie was fundamentally a good guy who unfortunately made some terrible mistakes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the first 18 minutes of this penultimate episode. As we say goodbye to a few random no-name members of the Dark Hearts, including Shane, but more importantly, we say goodbye to Lizzie and Robbie. Now that is how you open an episode, because that was tense as hell. Look, man, shootout sequences can be tough to shoot because of the choreographing of everything and the staging of how this character has to be in this position. You have to make sure it feels believable to the audience and keep the stakes high. Now, admittedly, there were some moments that it felt a little awkward and clunky, like the way that certain characters were holding their gun and how certain characters were moving in the situation. But again, I actually think that that was the point, that none of them are like actual marksmen and are trained assassins. So naturally, it would be a little bit clunky and awkward. And this is probably their first time for some of these characters, like Tom, for example. This is probably his first shootout of his career. And for some of these characters to not be perfect in that position, you felt that sense of tension and anxiety in the moment, especially for characters that we've grown to love. Now again, I figured that Lizzie would most likely die, unfortunately, and looking back at it, this whole time I was thinking Sam's whole thing about the deers would be tied into him, but in reality, if Lizzie was the deer in the literal headlights and was hit by a car on the road and died like the deers that Sam spoke of. Meanwhile, Robbie died maybe underestimating Jason and passionately being so close to strangling him, he didn't realize that Jason still had his knife on him in the heat of the moment, and that cost him his life. Now, later in this episode, we find out exactly what was in the bags, but I'm still not entirely sure what Robbie's plan actually was. I mean, I guess Robbie's plan would have been, let me lure Jason in by pretending I have the drugs. When he gets close enough, I can shoot him, I can kill him, and regardless if I get shot or not, like, I think Robbie was mentally prepared to die in this scenario. But again, I guess he would have killed Jason, he would have died, they would have looked in the bag, and the drugs were gone. Now, at the hospital, Kathleen will be back on her feet soon after a successful surgery. Meanwhile, Lizzie's ex will be gathering her belongings as Tom lets Tony know that it wasn't his fault that she died. But we all know that it was. Now, I do wonder if we'll ever meet Lizzie's husband in the finale. Like, I wonder if he's important at all to the story. I highly doubt it, but I am curious to know if we'll ever actually get to see him or meet him. Now, at the hospital, the task force find out that their assignment is officially over, as 2 special agents arrive to begin their process in conducting interviews soon for investigations of Lizzie's death because it's protocol. Now, clearly Tony's nervous about these interviews because every interview, every question is a potential step forward to him being exposed. Now, as confirmed later, the investigation part is because of Kathleen's eternal investigation about the leak. Also, I got the impression that Tom was paying attention to both Aaliyah and Tony in this scene, trying to figure out who the leak actually was. Now, back home, Tom shares unfortunate news about Lizzie as Sarah tells Tom about her divorce, which I'm officially divorced from that plot. More on that a little bit later. We see Aaliyah heading back to the HQ to gather her things as she realizes the full weight of the situation. She sees it for what it is, an internal investigation against the task force itself. Now, as she's leaving, she takes a small bullseye Lizzie had made for her, which in my mind is like a final tribute to her colleague that she lost. Now, at Tony's house, he's woken up by his chief, who is here for damage control. He tells Tony that he just recently was interviewed by the FBI Internal Affairs and that it was about Tony. As it looks like, we did have a second leak, and it's Tony's chief, Mike. And now come to think about it, it makes total sense, because someone higher up, or in Tony's position, his boss, would have had to have some type of authority or strong influence on how he managed to get his way onto the task force team. Now, they discuss Jason's whereabouts as Tony expresses the raw trauma of holding Lizzie as she died, but Mike tells Tony that he needs to forget about her. Now, Mike's response causes a brief physical exchange between the two as we watch Mike strangely dump Tony's head into the sink and washes his hair. That was so weird to me. Maybe, I don't know, maybe in his head and maybe in the show's head, it's you need to cool down, kid. Literally, cool your head. Cool heads prevail. But anyway, we see him telling Tony the next steps, and we see him telling him to keep his head in the game like last time, basically inferring that they've done this before. Now, I could be mistaken, but I think we're headed to a situation where we're going to learn in the finale that Tony may not have been a willing participant in the Dark Heart schemes, but he was a compromised asset. Perhaps Mike covered up for him in the past for a past mistake, and maybe Tony is being blackmailed. Whatever the reason, Tony seemed to be trapped and again maybe forced to be the insider, and his boss is the one applying all the pressure. Or Tony was willing to do what the Dark Hearts wanted him to do, and things just got worse over time. I'm thinking about last week when he told Jason, this is not good. We've gotten things out of hand. This isn't like last time. And we know this time around he was also emotionally attached to Lizzie, which now has him questioning his alliance with the gang. Now, at the station, Tom informs Maeve of Robbie's death and that Jason was responsible. Now, no one knows that Cliff is dead at this point, so we see Tom asking Maeve if she knows his whereabouts, which obviously she doesn't, as it's here that Tom learns about how Cliff and Robbie were sent to the wrong park during the ambush. Now, last week, I had wondered if Tom remembered Maeve from her hiding Sam in the trunk episode. Well, he did, as he brings it up in this conversation. Now, Tom reveals that he remembers her from that night, and Maeve admits that she knew she was wrong, but she did it because she was afraid that if she got caught with Sam, it would have meant that she would have been leaving Harper and Wyatt alone, as we can see that Tom is sympathetic to her situation. Behind the scenes, we see Tom talking to a DA about Maeve's chances in court and her involvement in the kidnapping of Sam. Tom shares his opinion on the matter, understanding that she was thrown into this situation by her uncle Robbie. This isn't just compassion that we're seeing here from Tom. This is Tom honoring his word to Robbie to protect his family from the fallout of his mistakes. Now, speaking of Sam, we see Tom visiting him in a juvenile detention facility. In a full circle moment, Tom acknowledges the tragedy that Sam has recently faced. Now, I don't know the legal side of how this would have worked out because of Tom's involvement in the case, but ultimately we see Tom taking Sam home. Now, I don't think Tom sees this situation as him replacing his son Ethan, but I believe Tom looks at this as a new chance of helping out another kid in need and to find a better situation, and this being like an unexpected path for Tom to healing and fatherhood. Meanwhile, we cut back to Tom's house where the boy from Emily's work invites her to a magic show. During this, Sarah's husband is there picking up their child as we see Sarah crying and Emily hugs her sister. I hate to sound like a broken record, but the whole Emily, Sarah, and hell, even throwing Ethan to the equation, all of that to me seems like it's in a completely different show. Don't get me wrong, I get the purpose of these characters and their stories, obviously how it affects Tom, and this being like a broken family. It's all about that situation, and we also learn how that parallels with Robbie's personal relationships, but I'm just being honest. Every single time that we cut to them, it feels like a commercial break in the middle of a show. And again, that's no disrespect to the acting and to the meat and potatoes of the emotional gravity that they're bringing to the show. It's just the most uninteresting part of the show for me. But hey, let me know your thoughts on this situation and when we cut to them in the comments below. Now, I'm not going to lie to you all. I got a little teary-eyed about this next scene. As we cut to Maeve returning home. She's met by Harper and Wyatt, who know that their father is dead. Now, it's not clear or blatantly said if Maeve is 100% in the clear or if she's currently out on bail, but it seemed like Tom's opinion on her involvement got her off the hook and Tom kept his promise to protect her. Now, the reason I said I got emotional is because I thought about the last scene between Robbie and Harper in the kitchen when they shared a dance. Robbie knew that this was a goodbye to his little girl, but she had no idea. Also, seeing little Harper crying really kind of got to me, and also thinking about the fact that these kids had their mom leave them and now their dad is dead. Now, back at home, Tom introduces Sam to Sarah and Emily, who immediately talk to Tom about his decision considering everything going on with Ethan's case. Now, this kitchen scene injected some much-needed levity into this rather sad episode, as we see Emily sticking up for her big sister, and maybe my favorite line in this episode.
Now, does anyone else want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Now we see Sam with his new Batman toy that I believe Tom probably gifted him on his way home, as he finds a safe place in Ethan's bed, asking Tom to stay with him until he falls asleep. It's a tender moment, and now I believe it's safe to assume that Sam is safe, but is he truly safe? The whole deer foreshadowing, which we discussed earlier, appeared to be fulfilled by Lizzie's tragic death. But what if after Tom's later confrontation with Tony, our crooked detective decides to cover his tracks by sending Tom's home information to the Dark Hearts? Now, I don't know if Tony knows who's in and out of Tom's house, but if he does send the Dark Hearts there, this would plunge not just Tom and his family, but now Sam into peril. Now, shifting gears, we check in with Kathleen recovering from her injuries. It's here we can officially confirm that Kathleen initiated the investigation into the task force itself. Now, this puts the rest of the lingering suspicions that some of you all still had about her potentially being the leak. Now, it's also here that Tom learns about what was found on Tony back in 2021.
Grasso was part of a task force with this other officer who thought he might be tipping off the gangs. Every time the strike force showed up to raid a house, the drugs were in the wind. You want to guess which gang they were investigating?
Dark arts.
Ding, ding, ding.
Now, this explains Tony's chief, Mike, earlier in the episode, talking about following orders like last time, as we see Tom is rightfully pissed off that this information was withheld from him before he joined the task force. As he also finds out that Jason and Perry remain at large, as their capture is still a #1 priority. Now, speaking of Jason and Perry, we find them held up in a safe house in the middle of nowhere, hoping to find the bag that Robbie threw in the river. Now, while Perry is fishing, we see Jason's anxiety is high as he calls Donna to speak to one of the members of the Dark Hearts, only to learn that no one has heard from Aaron. It's in this scene that we witness a crack in Jason's hardened exterior. His emotional distress over his wife's disappearance seems genuine, revealing he's a man deeply worried about the mother of his children who would never abandon them for this long. Now, the question is, will Perry finally confess what happened to Aaron to Jason? Now, keep in mind, only Robbie and Cliff knew about her involvement in the robberies, or at least setting the robberies up, and they're now dead. However, if Donna had any inkling of Aaron's true activities, her knowledge can be important. Now, I've always had a feeling that Donna knew what Aaron was up to, and I could see a situation where Perry might confess what he did to Aaron to Donna, and if Donna was aware of what Aaron was up to, maybe she was in on it, and with now this information, she would maybe share it with Jason to finish what Aaron started by tearing up the gang from within. And it's also important to remember, because it wasn't brought up in this episode, that Jason's deadline to be taken out has already happened. So again, will Perry turn in his son/best friend/brother, or will he continue to protect him? And just backtracking a bit, if Jason does find out about what Perry did to his wife, will Perry say, listen, she was an informant, she was a leak, she was screwing us over, I had to do what I had to do, or, he says it was an accident? What's Jason's response? Does he respond with anger? Does he understand? Does he try to kill Perry? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Now, another highlight of this episode for me happens here as we come to an end of this episode as Tom visits Tony's house. Tom is now armed with the information from Maeve about the park situation. He also now has footage from the park of that night, and Tom also brings up Tony's 2021 investigation that ties him into the Dark Hearts. Now, it's here we see Tony kind of pivoting the conversation as he asks Tom about his time as a priest and his experience with confessionals.
Priest gives you your penance, and you get on your knees, and you say your Hail Marys and your Our Fathers, and then what?
Tom believes Tony did indeed tip off the Dark Hearts, but with no evidence, it's just hearsay as Tom tells him that he's going to be coming for him, and Tony tells him to come. This scene was just damn near perfect. The performances, the tension was just so excellent between the two, and it actually makes me rethink about all the previous conversations earlier in the season between these two characters. Thinking about all those scenes they shared in the car and them talking about God and religion, in a way, without Tom realizing it, Tony was seeking absolution, asking if forgiveness for his association with the Dark Hearts was even possible. Again, this scene forces us to revisit all of Tony's previous conversations, especially thinking about that bar scene with Lizzie where he spoke about other crooked cops, and thinking about his hesitation when hooking up with her that night and him not wanting to get close with her, knowing the compromises he's already made. It really does paint this picture of a man wrestling with his conscience even as he digs himself deeper. Now we see Tom waste no time updating Emilia on the leak situation and Tony's compromised past, as we see them both set their sights on proving his insidious connection to the Dark Hearts. Now, the episode's closing moments offer a complex blend of closure and a new wrinkle to the story. We see Perry and Jason locate Robbie's bag that he threw in the water, only to find it filled with magazines about Canada, the very ones Robbie showed Cliff in episode 1. At the same time, Maeve receives a knock at the door. It's Shelley delivering a bag filled with drug money that is roughly worth $1.5 million. And I also bet, Robbie being the good guy that he was, I bet he gave her enough money to assure that Ray will never find her again. This appears to be Robbie's secret plan that he worked out with Freddie. He gave him the drugs in exchange for the money that Maeve now has in her possession. Now, I would assume that we will see the consequences of the situation if Perry and Jason learn that Freddie struck a deal with Robbie. The final shot of Robbie and the quarry staring into the distance with a subtle knowing smile is bittersweet.
Told me what a bright light of a child he was.
I forgive you. I love you. I'll be ready. Come straight home. I'll be there waiting for you.
From a broken man, husband, father, and FBI agent who couldn't find the moments of silence after suffering a loss to his family, but by the end, Tom finds the voice inside that ultimately led him to finding his forgiveness towards those around him, but more importantly, towards himself. Welcome back, everybody. We are here to break down episode 7, the season and maybe series finale of TASS, which was titled A Still Small Voice. As this episode shows us a task force seeking answers and the dark hearts cover their tracks, a shocking revelation leads them to a final confrontation. We've got so much to talk about in this episode, but also share my thoughts about the overall season, how I would compare it to Mayor of Easttown, and so much more. So let's not waste any more time. Let's break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. Now, we pick up this episode precisely where we left last week's, and that's Tom sharing Grasso's file with Emilia. The damning truth stares back at them, but there's zero evidence found linking Tony to any wrongdoing in 2021, a report shockingly approved by no other than his chief, Mike. Now, despite the case now being officially handed over to the OPS, Emilia's resolve remains unshaken. Her priority as in protocol is getting justice for Lizzie. She wants to return to the park where the sting operation occurred, searching for any overlooked fragment of the truth. Tom, understanding the weight of this plea, agrees. First thing in the morning, he promises Emilia, but first, he has to put Sam to bed, a subtle but significant detail that continues to show us that Tom is trying to find that balance between work and his home life. Emilia notices Sam is staying with him at temporary arrangement, as he says, which is foreshadowing a tough decision he'll have to make later in this episode. Now, for the first time I can recall all season, we see the narrative shifting focus away from our main characters, offering us more context into the shadowy operations of the Dark Hearts. We witness a private conversation between Vincent and Chief Mike. Vincent wants to sever all ties connecting them to Lizzie's death. Mike, however, is one step ahead, or so he believes. He's already planted the seeds, telling the feds that Grasso has been acting strangely lately. The plan is clear: frame Grasso as an unstable rogue, their perfect fall guy. When they inevitably take care of him, it will be designed to look as though Tony, consumed by guilt and madness, took his own life. Now, a correction on my behalf on the drug exchange that was talked about in last week's episode with Robbie. As is confirmed in this scene by Mike, that Robbie gave the drugs to Shelley, who then in return gave it to Lee out of Reading. Vincent, fixated on damage control, could care less about the money involved in the drug deal, but Mike reminds him of the substantial sum at stake. Now, their conversation is interrupted by a call from Vincent. It's Perry, who we know has been gone off the grid with Jason after the shootout. Vincent, holding all the cards, lays out an ultimatum. If Perry takes care of Jason before morning, Vincent and his crew won't come looking for him. Now, Perry offers no verbal answer, but his actions speak volumes. He hangs up and heads into the kitchen to grab a knife. Jason's footsteps are heard approaching as Perry stands silently, hiding a knife behind his back, ready to regain his trust with his so-called family and his brothers within the Dark Hearts. But we watch as Perry can't do it. He can't kill Jason. In his own twisted, sick way, he loves him, despite Jason being the very reason they're in this mess. This toxic, codependent dynamic offers a dark parallel in my eyes to what we see with Tom and Ethan's relationship, a father-son-like bond where the elder Perry finds himself unable to let go, even to his own detriment. But here's the thing I struggle with in this relationship between Perry and Jason. We are not meant to care for these characters who are the bad guys and have no grounds of being seen in a sympathetic way. In fact, or better yet, I'll speak for myself, I actively desire Jason's and Perry's demise, so this eternal battle that Perry faces doesn't interest me. Now, with all that being said, narratively speaking, Perry's inability to act creates a complex moral gray area, highlighting the loyalty that, unfortunately for Perry, Jason doesn't reciprocate later on. Now, this next scene delivers a disquieting visual. As we watch the camera moves past his body of water, we see a lifeless body slowly emerges to the surface. All we see is the person's hair and their shoes, and it's Aaron. Now, this is later confirmed, and while it's tragic, it feels oddly unserved in its resolve. I found it lacked any emotional resonance for me. We didn't get any reaction from the people I deemed to care for her, whether that be her children or her friend Donna. Instead, we're given Jason's reaction later in this episode, which for me simply didn't land the gravitas for such a moment. Now, throughout the rest of this breakdown, you'll hear me share my thoughts about these individual scenes, but also how I tie into the grand picture of the season. So with that being said, I wish this moment had been granted more time, allowing us to truly feel the devastating weight of Erin's passing. Again, it was unsettling to see her die last week, but as we'll discuss later, the payoff to me felt very underwhelming. Now, this next scene here I found to be fascinating, almost kind of jarring in the visual transition that follows. From Erin's submerged shoes, we cut directly to Tom's house, focusing directly on Sam's new shoes. Now, let me know if it was just me, but for a brief second, I thought we were seeing a future tragedy being revealed, and that being Sam's own demise, but thankfully, it wasn't. Now, the scene pivots to Emily, who's helping Sam organize his new belongings in his temporary room. Meanwhile, we see Sarah and Tom are making a list of other necessities for Sam, whose stay is projected to be anywhere between 3 weeks to a potential 6 months. Now, we watch as Sarah brings up a topic we discussed in my last breakdown. Is Sam a replacement for Ethan, a do-over for Tom? Now, we watch as Tom denies this, yet deep down, the unspoken truth lingers, perhaps on some subconscious level, it really is. Now, Emilia arrives and Tom shares the day's plan with Sarah. They won't be going to a fair. Instead, they're going to try to tie up loose ends. Now, prom promises to keep safe, a promise that I felt at the time was increasingly uncertain in this escalating narrative. I thought for a second that this was maybe the last time that Tom was going to be seeing his family. Now, from my experience, when you're watching any movie or show, to truly invest the audience in the journey of an antagonist, or in this case, a morally compromised character, the most effective method is to reveal their humanity through their family life. This brings us to Anthony Grasso. We see him paying a visit to his sister Frankie and his nephews. They catch up, frankly, playfully probing about his dating life, to which Tony admits he hasn't actively been looking for a relationship, which actually adds more context to him finding Lizzie in the middle of the situation even more tragic. But then the conversation shifts, weighed with the impending truth. Tony reveals that bad things are about to come out about him. It's here we finally learn of his true motives of working with the Dark Hearts. It's a simple motive. He was trying to provide for his family. The comfortable house Frankie currently lives in, to the excellent care their mother received in her final days, all were facilitated by Tony's dirty money earned from the people he shouldn't have been involved with. The burden has become unbearable, especially after Lizzie's death. He's done. He can't live with this anymore. He tells Frankie that he's going to turn himself in. Now, Frankie, with unwavering loyalty as his sister who knew him before he got tangled up with his gang, she tells her brother that no matter what is said about him, she knows who he truly is. You know, I find it so interesting how much the focus have shifted to Grasso in the latter episodes and how effective it's been, largely due to the compelling performance. However, something feels like it's missing. While Lizzie's death clearly serves as a powerful catalyst for his breakdown, I wished for more moments like this family scene earlier in the season. More glimpses of his eternal conflict, his silent struggle with his illicit lifestyle prior to Lizzie's death, to me would have further deepened our understanding and our empathy for the character, truly allowing us to witness the slow erosion of his soul. Now, back with Emilia and Tom at the park, they find the car Cliff got into the car accident in. Now, they also managed to find the busted phone that he last used, as they begin the process of putting the record to see what they can find. Now, back to the discovery of Erin's body, where the police also find her holding a chain, and it's Perry's chain with his initials on it. Now, I'll be honest, my immediate takeaway here is Perry's almost unbelievable carelessness. You would think someone in Perry's position, as long as he's been a part of the Dark Hearts, and I'm sure this wasn't his first time getting rid of a body, he would have been more careful getting rid of Erin's body, but clearly he wasn't. I'm no get rid of a body expert, literally no experience whatsoever, but based on, movies and shows and true crimes that I've seen, you would think that Perry would have at least found some rocks or something with weight to assure that her body didn't come up so quickly. Or scratch the whole water situation, why not bury her somewhere in the acres of land surrounding them? Now, as I say that out loud, I'm thinking to myself, not me making up situations to hide Erin's body, but I'm just saying, I guess you could say it happened so fast that he didn't really have time to think it all over, but not noticing that she had his chain is just crazy to me. This oversight is so wild to me that it forced me to consider a more complex motivation. Was this true incompetence, or in Perry's twisted mind, a final sacrificial act? Did he leave the link knowing Aaron's case wouldn't be filed away as a random disappearance? Maybe it's a desperate attempt to find meaning in a senseless act for the sake of her children not growing up with the idea of not knowing what truly happened to their mother. This might be me again, just making up excuses for Perry and not giving him the benefit of the doubt. I'm just trying to find reasons why he would be so careless with his chain, but let's just move on. Now, back with Jason and Perry, Perry figured that Robbie sold the drugs before the meetup and the money could only be in one place, and that's with Maeve, as they plan to pay her a visit. Now, going back to that scene, I truly would like to have known exactly what was Perry's endgame with this whole situation. Did Perry think that he would get the money and him and Jason would ride off in the sunset together, always on the run from the dark hearts? Or if he got the money, give it to Vincent and the Mother Club and everything will be all forgiven and Jason gets to live? Now, at Donna's house, she overhears a conversation with Breaker, who's speaking with Jason about heading over to Maeve's. Now, later in the episode, we see Donna has Vincent over and she tells him about the phone conversation she overheard, and she tries to tell him that Maeve's got nothing to do with anything going on. Now, Maeve isn't his top priority at the moment, as Vincent just wants to know the location of Perry and Jason, as we see Donna tells him where they can find them, and that's hiding out at her mom's place. Now, at Maeve's house, she shows her friend the money, and Maeve has no idea what to do with it. Now, I don't know if they literally counted all the money, but they say in this scene that apparently it was $1 million in the bag, but we know the drugs were worth around $1.5 million, if not a little bit more, so I'm to assume that the $500,000 that wasn't included in that number she mentioned was maybe given to Lee as like a buyer's fee, or Robbie told Shelly she could take the $500,000, that way she can get from under her ex-boyfriend slash husband slash father for children, Ray. Now, Maeve is torn between turning the money into the police or keeping it because she knows that Robbie died for her and the kids to have it, but she also knows that someone will probably come looking for it soon enough. As we watch as Maeve hides it based on her friend's advice to wait 6 months to a year, and if the cops find it, she can just simply say that Robbie hid it and she didn't know about it, or if no one comes, she can just take the money and start a new life. Not a bad idea that we actually see comes to fruition a little bit later in this episode. Now, back with Tom and Aaliyah, they show Kathleen the phone records from Ray's phone and figure it was swapped out by Grasso. Now, they're going to need her help with getting their guns back, but also need Kathleen to investigate the evidence locker and taking the phone to prove that Tony took it.
I'm going to need you to help me put my pants on. Upstairs. Come on, you can do it with your eyes closed.
Back with Jason and Perry, we see Perry in the water, almost like he's trying to find a way to wash away what he did, as we see Jason finds out about Aaron's death and what was found in her hand. Now, in the baptism of water, we see Perry sees Vincent and the others are coming and goes to warn Jason, and as Jason is walking towards Perry, he stabs him and tells him that he knows what he did. Now, even though Perry is being betrayed by Jason in this very moment, Perry still tells him that they're coming and that he should make his escape. As Jason shoves the knife deeper into Perry, killing him, he leaves Perry's body in the water dead, a fitting mirror image to the way Perry left Aaron as we watch Jason runs away. So let's talk about this scene. How do you all feel this plot and this reveal of Jason killing Perry and them not having an actual conversation about why Perry did what he did? Me personally, I'm in two minds. One being it wouldn't have mattered why Perry did what he did because we've seen and heard how bad Jason's temper is, so he most likely would have had still killed Perry regardless. Now, on the flip side, my second thought being, we never hear Perry articulate his suspicions about Aaron, or more importantly, the fact that he has been protecting Jason from the Mother's Club hit on him this entire time. To me, it makes those previous conversations with Perry and Vincent feel a bit incomplete or maybe unsatisfying because this isn't a real payoff. The emotional payoff is almost incomplete in my eyes, leaving Perry's complex motivations to protecting Jason this entire season feel reduced to him being simply a liar and a killer. I will say one more thing regarding Perry's death by the hands of Jason. Thematically, this reinforces the show's ongoing meditation on father figures. Perry and Jason's lethal dynamic stands in stark contrast to the bond between Tom and Ethan. We have these two men, in Tom and Perry, who basically adopted their sons. Now, the tragedy here is not just the death, but the failure of Perry to earn the benefit of the doubt, even in his final breath. Anyway, that's just where my head's at, but please share your opinion and feelings on Perry's demise at the hands of Jason. Now, back at Tom's, we see Sarah and Emily hanging animal posters in Ethan's old room for Sam. Now, we watch as Sam asks if Ethan was into animals, as Emily gets kind of nervous because we know that Ethan is a sensitive topic in his house, but surprisingly, we see Sarah actually shares a nice story about Ethan's kindness. Now, you all know how I've been feeling a little lackluster about the Emily, Sarah, and Ethan plot, but what I liked about this scene here is how it sets up how later on what we see what Tom does, but in this scene, it's starting to plant the seeds for someone like Sarah. They're starting to forgive Ethan as they're allowing the happy memories of Ethan to come back. Now, back with Tom, Kathleen, and Emilia, as she's got the phone from the evidence locker. They tried calling the phone, but they have no luck, meaning that it was just a plant phone. Now, in order to prove that Tony was involved, they need the real phone. Now, this is where Tom suggests that she get the analyst who we met back in episode 4 to do something that isn't allowed, but he's going to do it anyway, which I found to be a really funny moment. Now, they find the location from the last time the real phone was used, which leads Tom and Aaliyah to Grasso's house. Meanwhile, we find Mike, who is outside of Grasso's house to take care of him, like Vincent said at the start of this episode. Now, before going inside, we see Mike on the phone with Vincent, and he tells him about the money situation, and the line where we hear Mike mentions how they should split up the money, I instantly knew at that moment that Vincent wanted to get rid of Mike immediately after he took care of Tony. Again, remembering that Vincent wanted to get rid of all the ties. Now we watch as Mike goes inside Tony's house, gun in hand. The music's playing loud as Mike hits the corner, and we see Tony takes his gun and points it at Mike, and he makes Mike sit down and have a conversation. Now, they have a talk about how one in their position make up reasons for being dirty cops. It's here that we learn that Mike has been actually doing this for over 20 years. Tony has been doing this for the last 2 years and is eating him up from the inside. Tony tells Mike that he's going to basically turn himself in soon. Now, Mike trying to spin the situation and also stalling for time, Mike tells Tony there's a way out of this, and he tells him that Perry and Jason are now dead, but he also mentions the money has been found and that there's people heading over to Maeve's. Now, speaking of head, we see as Mike is talking, he gets shot in the head by Vincent, who then takes a shot at Tony, as Tony shoots and kills Vincent, and Tony was actually shot in the side during the shootout as he heads over to Maeve's. This is going to be a little bit of a nitpick for me, but these men in charge of the Dark Hearts are incredibly stupid, aka I blame the writing in this scene. Now, without a doubt, it was a shocking moment. I didn't see that happening in this moment. Like, I figured again that Vincent would eventually try to kill Mike, but I didn't anticipate it happening in this scene. My issues with this scene all boils down to the execution. Let's look at the scene from the inside out. Vincent came in and decided to shoot Mike, who's without a gun, instead of shooting Tony, who has a gun in his hand, and need I remind you, they're both here to kill Tony. It just seems so silly to me for Vincent to shoot at Mike first and not kill Tony, who again, they were there to kill Tony. Again, I know he wanted to kill both of them, but it just seems so backwards in my mind. I just felt like this was a point in the show that relied heavily on characters making fundamentally nonsensical choices to drive the plot forward. Also, going there without backup just seemed pretty convenient for Vincent at this point, because we've seen him being surrounded by other people throughout every time we've seen him. So the one time he doesn't have backup, he ends up dead. Now, also speaking about convenience, we see Tony arrives wounded outside Maeve's house. Pretty damn quick how he was able to get there, or at least that's the way it was edited. As we watch again, Tony's wounded, but he lets Maeve know that they're coming. Now we see Maeve in a panic as she gathers up the kids, but she forgets the keys inside. As she heads back inside, she can't find the keys, but once she does, she goes to head back to the car, but unfortunately, Jason's here. Maeve is now face to face with the man responsible for the deaths of his father, Cliff, and recently her Uncle Robbie. Man, I wanted Maeve to kill him right then and in that moment, especially when we see Harper comes inside looking to help Maeve and Jason points the gun at little Harper. Man, it's been a minute since I've been wanting to see a character die so badly, which we'll see here in a second, but we go back to the scene as Maeve tells Jason she's got the money and where he can find it. Now outside, Tom and Aaliyah arrive after tracking Tony's phone. Now Maeve takes Jason to find the money, but he sees that Aaliyah and Tom have arrived as he puts a gun up to Maeve's head and tells her to be quiet. Now Tom and Aaliyah find Tony bleeding out in his car as he tells them that Jason's inside. Now we watch as they call for backup, but they don't know exactly what they're walking into. Now we see Aaliyah looks upstairs and she's attacked from behind by Breaker as he puts her in a headlock. Now, I could just be making this up in my mind, but I felt like in this moment for the character Aaliyah, she was experiencing being attacked and abused by her abusive ex-husband. As we witness her managing to break free and she shoots and kills Breaker. Now, the gunshot echoes creates a distraction. Jason uses it to his advantage, forcing Maeve to move forward to his car, but we see them get into a little bit of a scuffle, but he manages to take her hostage as Tom and Aaliyah closes in. Meanwhile, we see Harper getting out of the car. She tells her little brother Wyatt to go in the trunk, which reminded me what Maeve did to Sam back in episode 2, as we see her wanting to help out Maeve, and I know I'm not the only one that was thinking this in the moment. I thought to myself, we are about to watch Harper accidentally get shot and die. Now, as they get closer, the how does she end up here came to mind in this moment as Tom sees Harper in Tony's car, but Tony's not in the front seat, as Jason comes across the back of his car and we see Tony in the back seat as he shoots and kills Jason and shoots him in the head. Now, Tom checks on Maeve and sees the bag of money, which will be important in a little bit, as we see the cops arrive and Tony's unconscious, but he did save Maeve before passing out, in a way making up for his sins and not being able to save Lizzie from Jason hitting her with his car, but again, he was able to save Maeve. Again, I would have loved if Maeve was the one that would have killed Jason to get back to what happened to her dad and also Robbie, but at the end of the day, I'm happy that Jason met his maker. I don't know why, but I do feel bad for Jason and Aaron's kids, and now they're orphaned, which only adds to the tragic tally of kids in this show who have lost their parents due to their parents' own choices. Now at the hospital, Kathleen faces the blowback from the feds, but on the positive side, the case is officially closed. But there's a discrepancy of the missing money, which means that Tom allowed Maeve to keep the money. Yet again proving he's a man of his word, assuring Maeve and the kids are safe like he promised Robbie.
You know what they say about wisdom, Kath? No. It's knowing what to overlook.
Now we watch Tom paying Tony a visit who survived his gunshot as he's looking for absolution. Tom, however, wisely points out that people often inflict their own penance.
Aren't you gonna give me my penance? I never gave anyone penance. People beat themselves up enough on their own.
This season's long exploration of religion, regret, and forgiveness culminates in this poignant exchange. So I guess it's safe to assume that Tony confessed his ties to the Dark Hearts and he went on to go to prison. I'm actually happy with this conclusion for Tony because after episode 6, I was hoping that he wasn't going to turn and lean into the idea of like getting away with all of this. Instead, he resisted the darker path, and in the end, his actions led to his accountability. I'm also glad we got to see Tom not give up on the case and making sure those all involved were taken down, even though I'm sure there's other members of the Dark Hearts who will just simply replace Jason, Perry, and Vincent. Season 2, you say? Now that the dust has settled, time to face the reality of Tom's most important case, and that's Ethan's trial. I don't know why this is hitting me now, but was Tom's reckless pursuit of the Dark Hearts a way of him avoiding the painful truths at home? Kind of like a dangerous distraction? The more he gets involved in his case, the less he can think about Ethan? Either way, we see Tom and Emily discuss Sam, and Tom thanks her for taking care of him. She's also been protecting her father this whole time, and the topic of her statement comes up, and his time to protect her and speak the truth about Ethan has to come. As we cut to the next morning at Ethan's trial, as Tom protects Emily by being the one to make the statement on behalf of their family. As we watch, Tom delivers a powerful statement. He recounts Ethan's childhood, his struggles, the voices he heard in his head, and the tragic accident that led to Susan's death. But he also shares glimmers of joy, the bright light that Ethan was as a child. In a moment of profound forgiveness, we see Tom tells his son to look at him as Tom tells Ethan he no longer wants him to live with the shame and that he forgives him and he loves him. When the day comes for Ethan to be released, Tom tells Ethan that he will be waiting for him and he will welcome him back with open arms. This to me is Mark Ruffalo's Emmy moment. A breathtaking display of empathy and grace born from their shared trauma. He's been great all season, don't get me wrong, but I don't feel like Mark Ruffalo really got his Emmy moment like we saw with Tom Pelphrey, who got many Emmy moments in this season. But this scene, this speech, to me cemented Mark Ruffalo's name as a nominee for the Emmys next year. Again, just talking about the scene, I just thought it was a beautiful moment showcasing Tom's forgiveness, something he told Sarah that he wouldn't be able to give a couple weeks ago, but also just thinking about him recently experiencing a shootout, a standoff, and seeing the death of Robbie and Lizzie, and also Tony's decision to turn himself in. All those being examples of how life is so short, and holding a grudge or not being able to show mercy for those who are in troubled positions only eats you up from the inside. And Tom now letting that go, he's able to thrive for himself but also his family. Now we see some time has passed, and I would say almost a year, due to the fact that we saw the trial which took place in June, and when we fast forward, we see Sam has his own binoculars next to Tom's, he has his own book bag with his name on it, we see a picture of him and Emily playing baseball, which we know to be a spring sport. Sam is thriving as a part of this family. As Tom has stopped drinking and his infamous drinking cup has been repurposed, we see them outside gardening, happy together, but unfortunately the news arrives as a family has been found for Sam. Now later that evening, Tom and Daniel talk about what he should do with Sam. Daniel's advice is clear. Tom should not be selfish with his love. He needs to prioritize what's best for Sam. As we cut to the decision where we see Tom find himself in a similar situation years ago as he envisioned Susan on the day they took in Emily and Ethan. The farewell is bittersweet as we watch Tom, Emily, and Sam meet and greet Sam's new family. And in a quiet, hopeful gesture, we watch as Tom begins preparing Ethan's room, a silent promise for his return. Now, going back to the decision, I disagree with it. I might be wrong, but I felt Tom would have made for a good foster father for Sam. Plus, speaking of Sam, I think he wanted to stay, right? He seemed comfortable. He loved being with Tom and out gardening and being with his, pseudo foster sister, Emily. I think he wanted to live there, and also thinking about the fact that he has to start over from scratch with this brand new family. So let me know if you all thought the decision was wise. Was it the right decision in the context of what we've seen in the show? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Now back at Maeve's, we see her packing up the car with all of their things as they're headed 6 hours away to a new life with a new opportunity with this money. As we see Maeve takes a photo of the house, a reminder of her dad, Billy, and her uncle, Robbie, a mix of good and bad memories as we watch them drive away. As our final shot shows Tom looking out the window, we see him with a peaceful smile. He's found his silence, he's found relief, and I believe he's regained his faith. The journey has been a tough one from the first time we met Tom back in episode 1, and it was marked with violence and loss, but in the end, Tom has found a measure of peace, ready to embrace a brighter future. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of Season 1 of Task. So how do we all collectively feel about this 7th and final episode? Me, I feel pretty good. Last week, I spoke my piece about how I felt that episode 6, for me, was the end of the chapter of the stories that I took the most interest in. And going to this episode, I looked at this episode as more of a chapter of an epilogue. We got to see the conclusion of the case. We saw them take down the key figures in the parts of the Dark Hearts in Perry, Jason, and Vincent. Tony turned himself in. Tom's at peace with Ethan, and Maeve and the kids are safe. Now, I've spoken my truth on the stories that led this episode and how I wasn't as engaged with them, and that being Ethan, Sarah, and Emily, and some of the dark hearts in their eternal affairs. I don't personally feel like Emily really got the most satisfying endpoint to her story, considering the amount of time that we spent with her in this season. I also felt the conclusion that we got from the dark hearts with Jason and Perry in particular wasn't the payoff I thought that we were headed towards. But with that said, despite my lack of enthusiasm towards them, I still found the performances to be great, but also I appreciate the themes and the characters' arcs that were explored. Whether it was broken families due to a tragedy, or fatherhood, or guilt, or shame, or forgiveness, just to name a few. Now, sharing my thoughts about the performances this season, I thought every single actor who graced the screen really brought their A game. For me, the standout performances were starting off with Mark Ruffalo, who I've been a fan of for as long as I can remember. I love the subtlety. I love the complications of the character, and he didn't have to say much to you to understand what's going on in his head. Let's talk about Tom Pelphrey, who I talked about a couple weeks ago. Big fan of his. This was a phenomenal, in my mind, maybe even career-defining performance, even though what he did with Ozark was just phenomenal. But Tom Pelphrey continues to show that he's one of the most underrated actors working in Hollywood. We have Emilia Jones, who I have seen for quite a while now. She was great in Coda. She was also great in the, what was it, Lock and Key on Netflix. Like, I like everything I've seen her in. I thought that she was phenomenal as Maeve. Also want to give a shout out to Thuso and Mbedu. I have been a fan of her since seeing her in the incredible Underground Railroad by Barry Jenkins, but she was also phenomenal in The Woman King. Such a powerful yet subtle but strong and just a awesome performance by her. What a star on the rise. And last but not least, even though I can't stand his character in House of the Dragon and even points in this show, I got to give a shout out to Fabien, who was phenomenal. Again, taking my baggage away from House of the Dragon. He's another great up-and-coming actor, and I thought he did a great job of portraying Tony Grasso with the complexities and the complications of him being the leak. Was he the leak? Was he not the leak? And ultimately, we saw how that played out, and I really enjoyed his performance. And again, even though I didn't mention everyone on top of this cast, again, those were my standouts, but I thought everyone in the show, all the actors, the directors, of course, the writer that we know from Mare of Easttown, all did a great job. Overall, this was both an exciting show, but also a very intimate show. The storytelling was a ticking time bomb of a thriller over the course of these past 7 weeks. Task brilliantly explored life's moral complexities in all of its shades, with the writing that once again delivered raw but relatable, grounded characters. I read in an interview, or I might have saw this interview when the show was leading up to when it premiered, and there was a conversation about the comparisons of this show and Mare of Easttown, which again take place in the same universe, is from the same writers, but Mare of Easttown was more of a whodunit, and it was a great whodunit, whereas Task was more focused on the why the people did what they did. Why did Robbie and crew rob those houses? Why did Tom give up on himself and his family? Why did Jason kill Billy? Why did Tony help the Dark Hearts? All examples of questions that guide us through this series. Now, while Task can definitely come off as a procedural type of show, but I think it really shined in exploring the deep sense of humanity and the authenticity that comes with that. Now, final things I want to mention before heading out. Some of my favorite scenes that I can remember from this show have to start off with that first family dinner that we saw at Tom's house about Ethan's reveal. I also got to give a shout out to Maeve hiding Sam twice in this series, which just had me on the edge of my seat. Got to give props to the shootout sequence from last week, which very much reminded me of like something from Heat. Which, speaking of the Heat, we got to talk about that car scene between Tom and Robbie. Also, speaking of Tom, him confronting Tony and the satisfaction of watching Jason finally die. And last thing I want to mention, since this does come from the same universe, is from the same creator of Mare of Easttown, which show did I prefer more, Mare of Easttown or Task? Now, this definitely deserves a further conversation, maybe at a later date, but as I'm talking to you all right now in this moment, in my bones, I think I'm going to go, and it's not a big gap, but I think I'm going to go with Mare of Easttown. I've lived with that show more. I've watched that show on a more of a rewatch. I plan on rewatching Task at some point later this year again, but right now I'm going to go with Mare of Easttown because for my sensibilities, I love a good whodunit element to a show, but also the internal struggles that we saw with the characters, including the great performance by Kate Winslet and Evan Peters. This was a phenomenal cast, but speaking of phenomenal, I can't shake the scene in the kitchen with Julianne Nicholson. Like, it was so heartbreaking. It was some of the best acting I've ever seen. And last thing we'll talk about here is that there's apparently talks about a season 2 of Task, which could potentially bring back characters like Tom, played by Mark Ruffalo, but he would be around potentially a new Task team. So I ask you all, is that something you all would be interested in, seeing a season 2 of Task? With that said, I think I've said all I want to about this episode and the show overall, so let's wrap up my breakdown of episode 7 of Task. It is now time to hear what you all thought about this episode. Comment below your thoughts about everything we discussed. What you think about the episode? How'd you feel about everything being wrapped up? Share your overall thoughts about the show as a whole. Would you consider this one of the best shows of the year? I definitely do. Who was your favorite character? What was your favorite episode? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. So what's next for the channel? I still have one more episode to cover for those that are watching Gen V Season 2. I'll have that coming soon. I have 2 more episodes to cover on Only Murders in the Building. And beginning October 26th, I'll be covering the next HBO Sunday night show, It, Welcome to Derry. Now, if you all have made it to this point in the breakdown, I really, really appreciate y'all. And also, just a shout out to everyone that's watched all these breakdowns for the past 7 weeks. I have enjoyed watching this show, but I've enjoyed it even more covering the show and reading you all's comments and feedback. It's been incredible. So again, thank you all. But the special word, the secret word of the week, put it in the comments right now. #forgiveness. Thank you all for watching or listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do me a favor, hit that like button. I would really appreciate the support. And when you all do hit the like button on YouTube, there's a hype feature. You can hype this video, which spreads this to new viewers. Speaking of new viewers, do me a favor, man. Hit that share button. Share this video, this breakdown to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show. And last but not least, consider subscribing to the channel for more breakdowns for movies and TV shows. And if you all are listening to this via podcast, I appreciate you all for listening. Please do me a favor, leave your thoughts in the comments on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Leave me a review and subscribe and follow the podcast. I would really appreciate it. Also, if you all can do me a favor, I don't anticipate you all to watch it in its entirety, but whenever I do a season finale or do like a breakdown of all the episodes, I make this large video recapping every video. So again, it'll probably be close to 2 hours long. You don't have to watch the whole thing, but definitely give that video a like, share that video. That will be dropping pretty soon. Alrighty, y'all, don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll see you really soon with more reviews for movie and shows and more breakdowns coming soon to the channel. I'll see you guys soon.